Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Became the Analyst's Guide? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. The only sound in the hero course classroom was the rhythmic scratching of 21 pens and the low, contented zzzzt of Shota Aizawa's specialized sleeping bag. Midoriya Izuku, however, was providing a subtle counter-rhythm, a frantic, low-level mutter-mutter mumble that vibrated the thin air directly above his desk. Izuku's notebook, officially titled Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 16, lay open. On the page, he was supposed to be outlining the structural weaknesses of temporary villain barricades, a simple, assigned exercise. What Izuku was actually writing was a flow chart detailing the maximum sustainable capacity of the UA security servers before a distributed denial of service attack triggered an external firewall warning. This calculation was necessary because he needed to download Ned's latest thesis on predictive behavioral analysis, and he preferred to do it during his 10-minute break. His lips moved almost silently, translating the complex data streams into spoken, whispered thoughts. So, if I route the connection through the Shibuya Municipal Laundry Network, the latency on the ping will disguise the data packet spike, but that leaves a 0.04% chance of a latent IP trace back to the dorm's subnetwork, which means I need to inject a randomized cipher into the header and flip. A harsh, rough length of Aizawa-sensei's capture weapon slammed onto Izuku's desk, cutting his internal data analysis off mid-thought. The classroom instantly went silent. Izuku snapped his head up, his green eyes wide with genuine alarm. His cover was the flustered, shy genius, and he knew he had just risked it. Aizawa-sensei hadn't even bothered to emerge fully from the yellow cocoon. Only his head, eyes glowing red with an activated quirk, peered out. His expression was a masterpiece of weary annoyance. Midoriya. Aizawa's voice was a low, gravelly rumble of pure exhaustion. You are disrupting the learning environment. I assume you were calculating the precise atmospheric pressure needed for Uraraka's training dummy to drift into low Earth orbit. The classroom snickered nervously. Izuku, mastering his practiced persona, stammered violently. No, sensei. I was just trying to deduce the most effective way to integrate the secondary support items into the primary capture protocol for the assignment. Sorry. He grabbed his pencil and bent his neck down so far it almost touched his desk, his whole body radiating apology and embarrassment. Aizawa stared for a long, painful moment. He saw a student who was clearly too smart for his own good, but also one whose social anxiety was crippling. He sighed, the red glow receding from his eyes. Just write, Midoriya. Write on paper. And keep the internal monologue out of the audible spectrum. Yes, sensei. Izuku squeaked. As Aizawa retreated back into the sleeping bag, the subtle smirk that briefly touched Izuku's lips was visible only to the reader. Rookie mistake. I should have factored in the ambient noise cancellation matrix failure rate. Izuku thought, his pencil now gliding across the paper to quickly diagram a new, superior encryption key. I'll adjust the vocal frequency dampener when I get back to the room. Can't risk that again. Aizawa-sensei might be sleep-deprived, but he only needs 1.5 seconds of concentrated analysis to break down a strategy. I must always be at least 45 steps ahead of his assumption of my competence. He was the perfect cinnamon roll. He was also a walking security nightmare. Later that evening, the UA Heights Alliance dorms were quiet. The curfew had long since passed, and the students were nestled securely in their beds, presumably dreaming of heroic deeds. Except for Izuku Midoriya, who was pulling back a large, framed poster of All Might to reveal a hidden digital keypad and biometric scanner. With a soft, nearly inaudible hiss, the wall panel in his room slid open, revealing a compact, custom-built workbench area. It looked less like a hero enthusiast's hobby space and more like the interior of a tiny, high-tech submarine. Izuku quickly shed his simple pajamas and pulled on his gear. It wasn't a costume, not really. It was sleek, dark gray tactical attire made of advanced noise-dampening fabric, complete with specialized boots that distributed weight perfectly to eliminate telltale footsteps on uneven surfaces. His face was covered by a lightweight, custom-molded mask that could instantly display various non-threatening, glitchy digital expressions. His face, if you could call it that, was the Analyst. He didn't need a heavy mask to hide his identity. He needed the mask to hide the one thing the pro heroes could never predict: youthful audacity. He paused to review his arsenal for the night. On the workbench lay the tools of his chaotic trade. The industrial-grade glitter bombs, MK5, not dangerous, but highly visible and engineered to stick to fabrics for weeks. They were packaged in bright orange, spherical casings that looked like oversized stress ball. The slime spheres, Model 2.0, small, clear marbles containing the ultra-slick lubricant. They looked suspiciously like harmless gumballs. The catnip puffers, beta test, these were the newest toys. Tiny, disc-shaped grenades designed to release highly concentrated, synthetic pheromones. For Aizawa-sensei, Izuku muttered with a mischievous grin. Must test the range increase. He picked up a small, neon-pink canister. Alright, everyone. Tonight we are checking the routing for the Mizutofu Waterworks main fiber lines. Seems a few smaller-time villains have been using them to transfer funds. And we are going to make them look very, very silly. He slipped his personalized utility belt on, loaded with non-lethal chaos, and then performed his final, necessary check. He pulled out a small, old-fashioned, wind-up radio and tuned it to a staticky channel. Security bypass engaged, he whispered to the silence. Time to go to work. In the dead of night, the warehouse district was a black canvas of shadows and steel. 3 minor villains, a man with a low-level elasticity quirk, a woman who could create fog, and a large brute with enhanced strength were finalizing a deal for stolen antique jewelry. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died. Security breach, the brute roared, but his voice was immediately drowned out by a sound that had no business being in a black market exchange. The loud, synthesized sound of a foghorn, followed by a chorus of tiny, high-pitched voices singing The Muffin Man. The fog villainess tried to deploy her quirk, but Izuku was faster. Puff, puff, puff. 3 of his small, green and purple capsules struck the ground. They weren't bombs. They were rapidly expanding oatmeal stout foam pads. The moment they expanded, the villains found their boots cemented to the ground by a thick, strangely sweet-smelling, non-toxic polymer that was impossible to tear through without tearing off their shoes. What the elastic villain stretched his arm, aiming for the shadowy figure. Izuku moved with a precision and speed that belonged to a hero far more seasoned. He sidestepped the arm and, with a flick of his wrist, tossed a small, shiny silver pellet directly onto the villain's exposed wrist. It immediately expanded into a metallic, self-tightening bracelet, not HNDCFFS, but a secure restraint. It was followed by another pellet that wrapped the brute's large chest in a crisscross pattern of lime green, high-density paracord, rendering his strength useless. The items were non-damaging, but designed to look absolutely ridiculous. Izuku stepped into the dim, emergency light. The Analyst. He didn't fight. He incapacitated with maximum absurdity and minimum effort. He paused just long enough to activate the final part of his routine. A tiny drone zipped down and affixed a brightly colored card to the biggest villain's forehead. The card read, Analytic Report, Mizutofu Fence Operation, Target, Strongman, 1129. Escape Protocol Failure. Reliance on quirk strength is negated by localized kinetic restraints, Model PIT. Strategic error. Leaving the ventilation unit ungated allowed for the injection of scent-based disorientation, SBD agent for arugula. Overall grade, D-. Please review your security assumptions. Your methods are lazy. P.S. The antique emerald necklace you stole is a high-quality fake. Check the refractive index next time. Izuku didn't wait for the inevitable sirens. His mission wasn't to fight the pro-heroes, but to avoid them while making their jobs slightly easier and much more confusing. He heard the telltale rush of wind overhead. Hawks is early. Predictive model beta was off by 4.2 minutes. Izuku grinned behind his digital mask. already calculating the necessary trajectory for his next chaos-inducing invention. Midoriya Izuku, or the Analyst, as the underworld had begun to refer to him with a mix of terror and utter confusion, perched on a water tower overlooking the Mizudafu financial district. His night's target was a quartet of small-time smugglers using abandoned bank vaults to process illicit goods. A simple job, but the location was chosen for a very specific and deeply mischievous reason. Aizawa-sensei uses the rooftops as his main artery for Sector 4. Izuku muttered quietly, his breath fogging slightly against the cool night air. He prefers the high ground, but his patrol pattern requires a 40-meter descent to check the alleyways of this grid. His estimated arrival time tonight, factoring in the current wind shear and his recorded patrol speed for Thursdays, is 1:22 a.m. That gives me 15 minutes to execute, deploy countermeasures, and make my primary escape route unpassable. He ran a gloved hand over the pouch on his utility belt. He needed maximum disruptive potential tonight. He selected the two shining, candy-colored spheres. The first was the neon pink pheromone puffer, catnip concentrate, and the second was the translucent green superslick slime sphere. Right? Izuku thought, his internal voice adopting a cheerful, almost excited tone that starkly contrasted with his focused vigilante demeanor. Time to check the pro-hero's commitment to his job versus the primal call of feline temptation. Dropping silently into the vault entrance, Izuku made quick work of the smugglers. He didn't use force, he used confusion. He utilized a localized, low-frequency sonic pulse that caused the smugglers' ears to ring so loudly they momentarily lost their balance and coordination. Before they could recover, Izuku had deployed a series of self-snapping bands that zipped around their wrists and ankles. The job was clean and fast. As the smugglers lay on the floor, dazed and highly irritated, Izuku pulled out his final accessory, a small, personalized label maker. He affixed the report to the leader's forehead. Analytic report. The Vault Crew, Grade F. Error. Your communication system was running on an open-source VPN with an easily traceable IP. I was watching your security feeds while I ate instant ramen. Recommendation. Quit and get a job filing taxes. It requires less planning than your current failed career. Time logged, 1:19 a.m. Pro heroes will arrive in 3 minutes. With a final, silent glance at his hand-mounted chronometer, Izuku knew he had to move. He was already running on borrowed time. Izuku scaled the fire escape with practiced ease, reaching the rooftop just as the shadow of Eraserhead, the silent, inevitable harbinger of exhaustion and restraint, swept over the building next door. Aizawa was a black blur, his capture weapon coiled and ready, his eyes instantly scanning the area. Aizawa was closing the distance far faster than predicted. Must be a good night for him, Izuku thought, a surge of adrenaline mixing with a thrill of anticipation. Time for the beta test. Izuku pulled the neon-pink pheromone puffer from his belt and lobbed it with a low-impact bounce against the lip of the adjacent building. The sound was tiny, but the immediate result was not. The device released a highly pressurized cloud of synthetic, industrial-grade catnip concentrate, pure, inescapable feline attractant designed to confuse even the most focused mind. Aizawa, mid-stride across the gap, froze instantly. He landed on the rooftop, his eyes still glowing red, ready to erase the vigilante's hypothetical quirk. But as the scent molecules hit his olfactory nerves, the focus vanished, replaced by an internal, biological scream, cat. Aizawa was furious at himself. His professional brain was screaming, capture the vigilante. The threat is escaping. But his primal brain, the part that hadn't seen a friendly cat in 3 weeks due to relentless patrol schedules, was completely overwhelmed. His body betrayed him. His shoulders tightened, his head involuntarily dipped, and his nose twitched violently. He looked less like the terrifying underground pro-hero and more like a large, grumpy man trying desperately to sneeze while holding a massive bag of temptation. He let out a low, involuntary sound that was neither a grunt nor a cough, but was disturbingly close to a frustrated meow of confusion. He's twitching. It worked. Izuku internally shrieked with delight. He knew Aizawa was a cat lover, He'd spent 2 entire nights of analysis time just cross-referencing Aizawa's infrequent Twitter activity with cat photos. This was the payoff. Aizawa managed to choke out a single, furious word, his eyes scanning the empty air. Where is it hiding? The distraction, however fleeting, was Izuku's lifeline. He sprinted, putting 20 meters of distance between himself and his suddenly feline-obsessed teacher. The synthetic catnip wore off quickly. Izuku made sure his non-lethal chaos was temporary, but Aizawa's rage did not. He snapped back to reality, recognizing he'd just been stalled by an invisible, smelly trap. His face contorted into a mask of pure, self-loathing fury. "You little rat!" Aizawa roared, a rare display of emotion. He deployed his capture weapon, the cloth snapping out like a whip, forcing Izuku to change direction and dive into the narrow, unlit alleyway below. Izuku reached the ground first. Knowing Aizawa would swing down right behind him, he reached into his belt and tossed the translucent green super-slick slime sphere directly onto a large, smooth paving stone, the only solid landing spot in the dark. The sphere shattered instantly, releasing a patch of clear, non-setting, frictionless lubricant. Aizawa swung down, aiming for the perfect tactical landing. He hit the target stone perfectly, but the moment his boots made contact with the slime, all friction disappeared. Aizawa didn't fall, he slid. His powerful downward momentum was instantly converted into a spectacular, horizontal glide. He shot across the alley floor like a very confused bowling ball, his capture weapon flying uselessly behind him. He didn't stop until he collided, with a tremendous clang crash, into a massive, overflowing, commercial-sized grease dumpster at the far end of the alley. The sound was deafening. Izuku, now rounding the corner and making his final escape, had to clamp a hand over his mouth to muffle the hysterical, panicked laughter bubbling up his throat. "My teacher just slid on gumballs and crashed into a dumpster." Izuku scaled a pipe and disappeared over the next roof. He didn't look back, but he knew Aizawa was now stuck sticky, smelling faintly of old grease and fresh catnip, and more determined than ever to find the elusive, ridiculous vigilante who treated his patrols like an obstacle course. The Analyst had survived the night, leaving behind a baffled, humiliated pro-hero. The scent of stale coffee and desperation hung heavy in the air of the UA staff room. This was partly due to the crisis meeting Netsu had called, but mostly due to Shota Aizawa. Aizawa looked utterly defeated. His bandages seemed more numerous, his posture was stiffer, and there was an unidentifiable slick sheen on his capture weapon. Most damningly, there was a faint but distinct aroma of artificial strawberry-flavored catnip clinging to his costume, subtle enough to deny, but powerful enough to make Hisashi Yamada, present Mike, wrinkle his nose from 3 meters away. Meanwhile, in the 1A classroom, Izuku Midoriya was the picture of exhaustion. He had dark circles under his eyes, his head nodded occasionally, and he had spilled his juice box during breakfast. "Midoriya, did you sleep at all?" Ochako Uraraka whispered, genuinely concerned. Izuku forced a weary smile. Just a lot of complex hero theory reading. I lost track of time." "It's fine, Uraraka-san." But Izuku's mind was still reeling from the successful escape and the vision of Aizawa-sensei becoming one with the commercial dumpster. His current exhaustion was merely a side effect of meticulously wiping the grease and catnip residue from his gear, followed by setting up his monitoring station. A convincing cover, he thought, but I need to look even more distracted than usual. Later that afternoon, while the rest of 1A was doing endurance training, Izuku was back in his room. He had dismantled the alarm clock on his bedside table, a brightly colored, cartoon All Might figure, and embedded within its circuitry was a micro-receiver and a secure, encrypted loop to a private, soundproof conference room deep within the UA administration building. He settled back with a bag of chips and tuned in. The screen displayed a high-angle shot of a large mahogany table surrounded by the top brass of Japanese heroism, Netsu, sipping tea, All Might, looking intensely serious, Detective Tsukachi, with a binder full of reports, Midnight, radiating composure, and, slumped at the end, the visibly sticky and irritable Aizawa. "Shoten," Izuku thought, crunching a chip a little too loudly. Netsu's tiny paw tapped the table. Thank you all for attending this emergency session regarding the vigilante we are calling the Analyst. Detective Tsukachi, please present the findings from the 2 most recent incursions. Tsukachi opened his binder. The Analyst is a serious problem, less for physical damage since there is none and more for the sheer intellectual audacity. The notes left at the scenes are devastatingly accurate, suggesting a person with highly specialized knowledge in forensic science, network architecture, and psychological profiling. Tsukachi then displayed a photo of the analytical note Izuku had left on Aizawa's defeated villains. The physical evidence. Tsukachi continued, holding up a clear plastic bag containing the remnants of the super slick slime sphere, which now looked like a dried, shiny puddle of sugar. This compound defies easy identification. It is non-toxic, non-corrosive, yet creates a temporary friction coefficient of virtually 0. We believe the vigilante's quirk is either a localized gravity nullification or some form of friction manipulation to achieve their highly efficient, silent movement. Izuku, watching from his dorm, choked on his chip. Friction manipulation? He scoffed internally. It's vegetable glycerin and industrial-grade polyvinyl acetate. You can buy the ingredients online for less than 5,000 yen. The genius isn't the substance, it's the timing of the deployment. Nedzu chimed in, adjusting his bow tie. Precisely. We are dealing with a mind on par with my own, but corrupted by a desire for chaotic justice. This individual clearly possesses an advanced degree in engineering and perhaps military training, judging by the precision of the devices. Izuku almost dropped the clock. Advanced degree? Military training? I built the catnip puffer using a modified hairspray can and watched 4 YouTube videos on aerosol dynamics. They think I'm a veteran. He giggled silently. I still need my mom to cut the tags out of my shirts. The focus then shifted to Aizawa, who clearly wished he could activate his quirk and erase his own memory of the past night. Eraserhead, Nedzu prompted cheerfully. Could you detail the method of your stall during the pursuit last night? Aizawa rubbed his temples, his voice flat with humiliation. The individual deployed 2 distinct countermeasures. The first was a phenomenal aerosol that induced temporary, but profound, disorientation. Midnight leaned forward, smirking faintly. And the effect was? Aizawa hesitated, looking at his coworkers with an expression of profound suffering. It smelled intensely of catnip. High-potency, synthetic catnip. It threw my focus for precisely 3 seconds. All Might covered his mouth to hide a massive cough that sounded suspiciously like suppressed laughter. Tsukachi scribbled furiously. And the second device? Nedzu pressed. An invisible slicking agent deployed perfectly to intercept my landing trajectory, Aizawa grumbled, the memory of his graceless slide into the grease dumpster resurfacing. I estimate the surface was treated to reduce friction by approximately 98%. It required a city cleanup crew 3 hours to remove the residue this morning. Izuku mentally high-fived himself. 98.5%. Get your numbers right, sensei. This level of calculated humiliation suggests a deep understanding of our personal quirks and weaknesses, Eraserhead, Nedzu noted, completely missing the fact that Aizawa's love of cats was the most basic piece of public information about him. The vigilante is attacking us psychologically. Nedzu stood on his chair, tapping a diagram on the board, a complex layout of the UA campus's advanced security grid. The analyst believes they are smarter than we are, Nedzu stated, his voice now crisp and challenging. They watch us. They analyze us. Therefore, we will give them a target they cannot resist. I am personally overseeing the deployment of the Project Chimera security upgrade. It is an adaptive, quantum-encrypted defense network. If the analyst is as intelligent as their notes suggest, they will attempt to breach it simply to prove they can. Nedzu looked directly into the ceiling camera, the same feed Izuku was watching, and smiled sharply. When they try, Nedzu promised, we will be waiting. No one is smarter than the principal of UA. Izuku Midoriya paused, holding a half-eaten chip. He looked at the cartoon All Might clock, then at the image of the principal's confident face. Oh, Nedzu-sensei, Izuku thought, a dangerous, competitive glint in his eye. You just challenged the wrong cinnamon roll. He pulled out his notebook and started drawing a highly complex circuit diagram. The clock, ticking quietly on his desk, had just become a timer for the next great intellectual duel. Nedzu's challenge, issued through the very security feed Izuku had illegally accessed, was not merely an invitation, it was a personal gauntlet thrown at the feet of the analyst. No one is smarter than the principal of UA. Izuku Midoriya, sitting at his desk, smiled a genuine, excited smile for the first time in days. This wasn't about vigilante justice, this was a puzzle. A highly advanced, multi-million yen intellectual cage match designed by a hyper-intelligent mouse. And Izuku was going to solve it with a paperclip and a piece of string. He had spent the last 2 days meticulously analyzing the security footage of Nedzu's presentation. The Project Chimera security upgrade was, as expected, a digital fortress. Quantum encryption, self-learning firewalls, and protocols designed to instantly shut down and trace any incoming data spike. The flaw, Izuku whispered to himself, adjusting his glasses, is over-engineering. He tapped his pencil on a diagram he'd scrawled in the corner of his notebook. Nedzu, in his brilliance, had created a system so advanced, it had forgotten the basics. It was an entire castle protected by a diamond-plated front gate, completely ignoring the loose paving stone right next to the moat. Izuku's eyes landed on a tiny, blurry schematic of the UA power substation located a short distance from the dorms. In it he spotted what he was looking for, a singular, archaic junction box labeled Emergency Environment Monitoring Substation Gamma. It's a 40-year-old system, Izuku murmured, his fingers flying across his laptop to pull up old UA maintenance logs. It monitors basic atmospheric integrity, humidity, temperature, light levels. It's completely analog, hardwired directly to the system control room, and because it's so old and only reports non-critical data, it's not integrated into the new Chimera encryption network. They probably forgot it exists. Izuku didn't need to hack the firewall, he just needed to trick the thermometer. His plan was simple, physical, and absolutely absurd. He would sneak out, access the junction box, and inject a small, harmless payload via the most low-tech physical method imaginable. The dorms were silent at 2 a.m. Izuku had prepped his gear, a roll of specialized, sound-dampening duct tape, his tactical clothes, and the device he'd built for the hack, a large, bright yellow, emergency thermostat override box that looked like a child's toy. Inside was nothing but a low-power signal generator and a modified radio antenna. His biggest challenge wasn't the UA grounds. It was Aizawa's post-catnip paranoia. Izuku knew Aizawa had installed new, hypersensitive, non-quirk-based motion detectors near the dorm entrances. Izuku didn't try to bypass them. Instead, he used his last piece of ingenious preparation, a tiny, remote-controlled drone, disguised as a common pigeon, that he flew directly into the dorm's external floodlight. The drone hit the bulb, plunging the entire front porch area into total darkness. The motion detectors instantly went into error mode due to the sudden lack of light contrast. 20 seconds of blind spot, Izuku calculated. He darted out the front door and was gone before the backup lights even kicked in. He reached the maintenance substation easily. He located the dusty, labeled junction box. It wasn't even locked properly, just latched with a rusty hook. Honest mistake, Nedzu-sensei, Izuku whispered, prying the panel open. Overlooking the simple things. He quickly identified the main temperature sensor's power cable. It was a single, flimsy wire. He taped his yellow box to the outside of the panel. Then, he took a tiny, specialized needle and physically pierced the insulation of the cable. He wasn't sending a digital packet. He was generating a physical wave oscillation, a signal that would register to the analog sensor as a sudden, massive temperature spike. The old system wouldn't recognize it as a hack, only as a catastrophic environmental failure. He flipped the switch on the yellow box. The box blinked a bright, angry red. Deep within UA's secure surveillance room, Nedzu sat with Aizawa. They were watching the Chimera systems monitor, which displayed a beautiful, three-dimensional, glowing matrix of complex encryption layers. They were waiting for the digital intruder to fail. He'll try the core encryption, Nedzu chirped confidently, swirling his tea. He'll use a zero-day exploit, or perhaps a quantum tunneling method. He will fail, of course. We're running 6 layers of real-time adaptation. Aizawa was slumped in his chair, tired but alert. I'll be impressed if he gets past the 2nd layer, Principal. Suddenly, the highly complex matrix screen began to flicker violently. Red warning lights flashed across the control room, and a shrieking siren began to blare, not a security siren, but a deep, throbbing environmental emergency alarm. Nedzu nearly dropped his teacup. Impossible! The core defenses are intact. What is happening? A large text overlay flashed across the screen. Critical environmental failure detected. Substation Gamma. Temperature reading 8,000 degrees Celsius. Initiating emergency system dump. 8,000 degrees? Aizawa stared. The entire sector should be molten slag. What kind of quirk is this? Nedzu, his usual composure gone, frantically typed commands. It's a false reading. But the system is designed to treat environmental failures as the highest priority. It's dumping the core system data. It's opening a maintenance backdoor. Before Nedzu could stop it, the sophisticated, glowing matrix screen dissolved, and the entire high-security UA monitor was taken over by one final, utterly humiliating image. It was a perfectly rendered GIF of Nedzu's head transposed onto the body of a tiny, cartoon hamster running tirelessly on a wheel. The hamster was wearing a UA principal's bow tie. Underneath the image, a large, neon green text box flashed continuously. Analysis complete. Flickering is not a quirk. It is a faulty analog sensor. System dump successfully intercepted. Suggestion: Project Chimera needs an analog security patch, ASAP. Also, you really need to try some cheese. The analyst. Nedzu's jaw dropped. Aizawa simply stared, slowly covering his face with his hands. He didn't hack the encryption. Aizawa mumbled, his voice muffled by his sleeves. He hacked a thermometer. He exploited an outdated, non-critical peripheral to force the primary system to create a vulnerable dump point. Nedzu breathed, his voice a mixture of awe and absolute, mortified rage. He used complexity against us. He knew we'd never look at the ancient hardware. He is indeed smarter. Izuku sprinted back to the dorms, ripping off the yellow box and the tactical gear. He changed back into his pajamas just as the backup floodlights flickered back on. He climbed back into his bed, heart hammering against his ribs, but a triumphant, wide grin stretched across his face. He quickly checked his monitoring clock. The image of Nedzu the hamster was still looping. His phone buzzed with a quick, encrypted text message from a known underworld contact. From Anonymous Underworld. UA News. The word is out. UA's news system was breached by a picture of a rodent on a treadmill. What kind of vigilante are you? Izuku just closed his eyes, pulling his blanket up to his chin. The funny kind, he thought. The kind that wins. He was exhausted, but he had just proven he was the greatest analytical mind in Japan, and no one knew it but him and Nedzu, who now had a lot of explaining to do. Izuku Midoriya was enjoying his status as Nedzu's intellectual archnemesis, but the thrill of the UA hack was fading. He needed a new challenge, and the recent increase in aerial patrols gave him the perfect target. Hawks, Izuku muttered, reviewing the Hero Commission's latest patrol logs illegally accessed, naturally. High speed, extreme vertical mobility, and relying primarily on superior observation and reaction time. His biggest weakness isn't his quirk, it's his need for clean lines of sight and aerodynamic efficiency. Izuku sat in his dorm, assembling his next invention. He had upgraded his signature chaos inducers, the industrial-grade glitter bombs, MK5. These weren't decorative sparkles. This glitter was custom-cut from metallized polyester, charged with static electricity, and mixed with a superfine, non-toxic adhesive agent designed to defy removal from synthetic fabrics like, say, a Hero Commission uniform. It was the gift that kept on giving, long after the chase ended. His plan was to ambush a group of black market weapons dealers operating out of an abandoned high-rise construction site. This location, Izuku knew, sat right in the middle of Hawk's fastest flight corridor. Hawks approaches the target at an average velocity of 180 km per hour. Izuku calculated, sketching a deployment diagram. I need a dispersal radius of 30 meters at an altitude of 5 meters above the point of impact. The only thing that can ruin that speed and observation is mass visual noise and... Izuku paused, pulling out a second gadget, the sonic screamers. These were tiny, streamlined drones that, when launched, would emit a piercing, oscillating frequency guaranteed to interfere with highly focused senses. And a headache that requires a vacation, Izuku finished with a mischievous smirk. The construction site was cold and windy. The 4 arms dealers were tense, conducting their shady business under the cover of a half-built roof. Izuku, the analyst, was hiding in the shadows of a crane boom, having already disabled the perimeter lights by shorting them with specialized sugar water, a great, untraceable conductor. He dispatched the villains quickly, incapacitating them with expanding foam that looked like giant, neon-yellow rubber bands. As he zip-tied the last one, he heard the faint, high-pitched whoosh of air displacement hawks. Right on time, Izuku murmured, checking his watch. 11:58 p.m. Hawks was exactly 1 minute early to his predicted arrival window. Good for him. Too bad for his laundry. Izuku pulled out 4 of the bright, orange glitter bombs. He positioned them strategically on the narrow metal struts that lined the rooftop edge. He then activated his sonic screamers, 2 tiny silver drones, and launched them high above the building. They were almost invisible against the city lights. Hawks, coasting in with his usual effortless grace, instantly spotted the commotion, tied up villains and a shadowy figure ready to flee. He accelerated, preparing to swoop down and snag the elusive vigilante. As Hawks banked sharply for the intercept, Izuku initiated his chaotic countermeasures. Boom! The sonic screamers kicked in. The noise wasn't loud enough to damage hearing, but it was a piercing, fluctuating EOOE that instantly shattered Hawks' concentration and fine-tuned auditory awareness. The noise echoed strangely in the half-built structure. Hawks faltered, shaking his head. What in the is that a broken speaker? It sounds like a haunted radio. This momentary hesitation was all Izuku needed. He pressed a button on his wristband. Puff, 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 puff. The 4 industrial-grade glitter bombs exploded simultaneously. They didn't detonate outwards. They dispersed upwards in dense, brilliant clouds of concentrated, metallic red and gold static-charged glitter. Hawks flew straight into the thickest part of the cloud. The effect was instantaneous and disastrous. The high-speed impact coated every single part of his streamlined uniform and, most importantly, his hundreds of highly sensitive feathers in a sticky, twinkling shroud of glitter. Hawks blinked, his vision temporarily blinded by the sparkling particles embedded in his eyelashes. He tried to speed up, but the added texture and weight of the glitter on his flight feathers severely impacted his aerodynamics. What is this? Is this craft supplies? Hawks shouted, coughing a mouthful of surprisingly sweet-smelling red glitter. Izuku watched from the shadows as the fastest man in Japan momentarily lost control, flapping his wings violently and veering wildly as he tried to shake off the blinding, shimmering coating. The sonic screamers continued their annoying, high-pitched whine, making it impossible for Hawks to focus on Izuku's exact location. Izuku took the opportunity to sprint to his final escape route. Hawks, fighting to stay aloft, eventually managed to gain altitude, leaving behind a magnificent, shimmering trail of red and gold glitter that rained down over several city blocks. He was forced to retreat, not because he was defeated, but because he was compromised. He landed on a nearby roof, wobbling slightly, his typically pristine, aerodynamic form now a disaster of twinkling particles. He looked down at his famous red wings, now sticky, heavy, and glowing like a particularly aggressive Christmas ornament under the streetlights. "This is impossible," Hawks growled, trying vainly to wipe his face, only succeeding in transferring more glitter onto his gloves. "This stuff is bonded. Feels like sugar glue." He looked back at the construction site, spotting a small, brightly colored slip of paper fluttering in the wind. He managed to retrieve it with a sticky feather. The note read, "Analytic report, Pro Hero Hawks, Flight Pattern 4A. Error, over-reliance on visual and aerodynamic efficiency. High velocity equals high particulate absorption. Observation: you need to pre-analyze wind shear when approaching a static trap. Suggestion: try dish soap. Or maybe a full chemical peel. I suggest you ground yourself for 2 weeks. The commission is going to love the visibility. The analyst. Hawks crushed the note in his fist, which instantly covered his palm in glitter. He was not just foiled, he was stylized against his will. The entire area was now marked by a shimmering trail that would make him the laughingstock of the entire pro community. Back in his dorm, Izuku Midoriya was reviewing the local news feed. The headline, scrolling across the bottom of the screen, was already fantastic. Vigilante strikes again, glitter bandit, leaves a shimmering trail of crime. Izuku changed the title in his personal hero notebook next to the industrial-grade glitter bombs entry. He crossed out life and wrote, "The Hawk's Deterrent." He smiled, already drafting the schematics for an anti-flame foam just in case Endeavor decided to join the chase. Tenya Ida, Class 1 as diligent representative, ran his life on a schedule as precise as a Swiss timepiece. Naturally, his internal consistency checker had been loudly sounding alarms regarding Izuku Midoriya for the past 3 days. The inconsistencies were minute, almost microscopic, but to Ida, they were flashing red warning signs of chaos. First, there was the exhaustion. Midoriya-kun was constantly tired, but it wasn't the slump of a student pulling an all-nighter for a test. It was the deep, weary set of the job belonging to someone who had been running on pure adrenaline and 4 hours of sleep for a week. Second, there was the smell. When Ida had offered to help Izuku retrieve a textbook from his desk, Ida's sensitive nose honed by years of inhaling high-octane engine exhaust detected a faint, peculiar aroma on Izuku's canvas backpack. It was a subtle blend of ozone, industrial-grade cleaning solvent, and something faintly sweet and vaguely metallic. It was the smell of a machine shop, not a library. Most recently, Izuku's fingers, which usually trembled with anxiety, had begun moving with an astonishing, confident dexterity when he was typing during quiet study hours. Ida had observed Izuku type an entire, complex block of code, a language Ida didn't recognize, in under 30 seconds, before suddenly reverting to the slow, hesitant typing of a nervous high school student. Midoriya-kun is an excellent student, Ida mused, adjusting his glasses while watching Izuku struggle to focus on present mixed English lesson. But his behavior deviates wildly from established norms. There must be a logical, rule-based explanation. Later that afternoon, in the shared common room, Izuku was attempting to draft a quick sketch for a new, silent escape mechanism while pretending to outline an essay on rescue strategies. Exhaustion, a side effect of successfully covering up the Hawks incident, which was currently trending on social media with the hashtag #glitterwing, was making him sloppy. He stood up quickly to grab a cup of tea, forgetting his notebook was open on the coffee table. Ida, ever the conscientious hero, had seen Izuku's pencil slip from the pages. He marched over to return it, his steps precise and measured. As he reached the table, his eyes, ever drawn to detail, caught the schematic drawn in Izuku's notebook. It wasn't hero notes. It was a complex, multi-layered diagram filled with strange annotations: EM wave injector port, analog, and nonlinear oscillation frequency. The diagram was technical, dense, and looked like something stolen from a high-level corporate R&D lab. Ida froze, his posture suddenly rigid. This was clearly not homework. This looked like plans for something potent, perhaps even dangerous. He immediately jumped to the most egregious rule violation his rule-abiding mind could conceive of: illicit support gear. Ida waited until Izuku returned, setting the pencil down with deliberate care. "Midoriya-kun," Ida began, his voice dropping to a serious, low tone designed to convey the gravity of a rule infraction. His arms were chopping with the force of his concern. "I must confess, I saw your notebook just now." Izuku's heart plummeted. He knows. The slime, the glitter, the UA hack, he's figured it out. Izuku's face went white. He started stammering, his hands flapping in immediate panic. "Ida-kun, I can explain. It's not what it looks like, I swear." "Silence!" Ida commanded, chopping his arm sharply. You do not need to swear, Midoriya-kun. You only need to confess your violation of UA's strict support item development code. Izuku blinked. What? Ida leaned in conspiratorially, his voice maintaining its serious timbre. It is clear that you are utilizing your powerful intellect to secretly construct advanced, unregulated support items here in the dormitories, which is strictly prohibited. The complexity of your diagrams suggests you are creating tools of extreme power outside of the regulated development studio. This is a massive safety hazard. Izuku felt a wave of dizzy relief. He thinks I'm a rogue inventor, not a vigilante. It was a perfect cover. He leaned into the lie instantly, letting his usual nervousness overwhelm his explanation. Lita-kun, you see, it is for a specialized project. I need to ensure that the harmonic resonance of the non-Euclidean circuit loop is properly dampened, otherwise, the localized temporal phasing field could interfere with Power Loader Sensei's frequency calibration, leading to an unanticipated spatial displacement event. He was mumbling so fast and using such absurdly complex and completely fabricated pseudoscience that Ida, a brilliant student of rules, was completely lost in the technical jargon. Ida stared, his mouth slightly agape, processing the stream of technobabble. He didn't understand the specifics, but he understood the implication. Midoriya-kun was a raw, volatile genius whose gifts, when unregulated, threatened space-time itself. I see, Ida said, his chopping hands slowing slightly. A localized temporal phasing field. A most unfortunate risk indeed. He snapped back to attention. Midoriya-kun, I forgive your initial secrecy, but I cannot forgive the risk. I now realize that you are not being dishonest, but merely attempting to contain a vast, unregulated genius. As class representative, I shall not report you to the faculty, but I will be monitoring your extracurricular technological pursuits. Ida clapped Izuku firmly on the shoulder. You need structure, Midoriya-kun. I will personally help you draft a strict, 7-day support item development schedule to ensure all your complex temporal phasing fields are safely contained. Izuku, slightly stunned, could only stammer, Thank you, Ida-kun. That's very rigorous. As Ida marched away, already pulling out his scheduling app, Izuku felt a triumphant wave wash over him. His chaotic nightlife was safe. His greatest weakness, his genius, was now concealed behind a perfectly rule-abiding shield. Ida, the most meticulous student in the class, was now officially the guardian of Izuku's secret genius inventor persona. Perfect, Izuku thought, picking up his notebook. Now, how to manage an official schedule while simultaneously fighting crime. The next few weeks were going to be exhausting and hilarious. In the cold, clinical glow of his workbench, Izuku Midoriya was putting the finishing touches on his latest creation. Unlike the glitter bombs and slime spheres, this needed to be durable, heat-resistant, and most importantly ridiculous. His target was a large-scale drag smuggling ring operating out of a decommissioned steel factory, a location so vast and open it was a perfect arena for the current #1 hero, Endeavor. Endeavor's combat strategy is predicated on area denial and intimidation through lethal heat, Izuku muttered, adjusting a pressure gauge on a large, colorful canister. He doesn't use finesse, he uses overkill. Therefore, my countermeasure must render heat useless, instantly, and with maximum visual insult. Izuku pulled out his masterpiece, the ablative foam cannon, model Marshmallow. The foam inside was a proprietary blend of non-combustible polymers and specialized coolants. It was heavy, sticky, and designed to expand to 10 times its volume upon activation, forming a thick, white, spongy barrier that would not burn. It looked precisely like giant, industrial-strength shaving cream, or more accurately, a massive, slightly tacky meringue. If you can't beat the heat, Izuku concluded with a triumphant nod, you hide behind dessert. Izuku, as the analyst, dropped silently into the cavernous factory. He disabled the 15 low-level thugs using a simple localized ultrasonic tone that rendered them all nauseous and dizzy within seconds. He secured them with automated flex cuffs, leaving behind his usual, scathing analysis of their pathetic security protocols. He finished his work just as the air pressure changed dramatically outside. The heat was the only warning he needed. Endeavor was coming, and he was coming fast and furious. Izuku bolted for the high-ceilinged Dilve Bay, his hands gripping the portable foam cannons. Endeavor arrived, bursting through the factory doors in a blinding inferno of blue and orange flames. He immediately spotted the shadowy figure attempting to flee. The sight of a vigilante, especially one who had recently humiliated Aizawa and Hawks, sent Endeavor's already volatile temper into overdrive. "Stop, vigilante!" Endeavor roared, and without hesitation he unleashed a massive attack, a searing jet burn aimed to scorch the entire escape route. Izuku didn't flinch. He didn't try to dodge the heat, he ran towards the narrowest exit and fired his first foam cannon against the opposing walls and ceiling. The air filled with a loud, pressurizing hiss. A gigantic, frothy, white cloud of sticky foam erupted from the canister, expanding with terrifying speed until it formed a solid, ceiling-high wall of ablative meringue right across the bay. Endeavor's terrifying jet of flame slammed into the barrier. Instead of burning, the foam instantly absorbed the colossal heat. A massive cloud of steam exploded back, smelling intensely of burned sugar and slightly sweet chemicals. The foam barrier had held, its exterior crusting over instantly but remaining perfectly intact, blocking Endeavor's path and momentarily blinding him with the steam. "What is this garbage?" Endeavor shouted, stumbling back from the intense steam and the ridiculous, white, sticky wall. It looked like he had run into a giant, sugary pillow. Izuku, now hiding behind a support column, watched his analysis pay off. The foam was completely non-combustible. Endeavor launched a second, furious burst of flame, but the foam simply hardened, expanding slightly further. Izuku didn't wait. He aimed the second foam cannon low and fired it at the ground, right where Endeavor was standing. The foam erupted around the number 1 hero's thick, fireproof boots. Endeavor tried to lift his foot, but the foam expanded exponentially, hardening around his lower legs, cementing him to the spot. He tried to stomp it down, but the foam merely cushioned the blow and tightened. Within 10 seconds, Endeavor was trapped from the ankles to the mid-thigh in a ridiculous white, sticky, massive cylinder of foam. He was immobile, furious, and looked utterly absurd, like a statue carved out of marshmallow fluff. "You little pest! I'll burn this entire factory to the ground." Endeavor screamed, his flames flaring around his arms. He gathered his power, preparing his ultimate technique, the prominence burn. The heat radiating from his body was immense, causing the surrounding steel to warp. The foam simply began to expand again, cushioning the heat and pressing slightly against his legs. The high-powered foam was designed to absorb kinetic energy. The massive thermal output was being neutralized, 1 calorie at a time, into a slow, visible steam. The massive flame attack never materialized. It was strangled by an expanding, sticky, white prison. Izuku, laughing silently behind his mask, scaled an adjacent wall. He affixed a bright yellow, circular note onto the foam right next to Endeavor's trapped elbow. Analytic report, Pro-Hero Endeavor, Combat Style. Excessive reliance on high-temperature output in confined spaces. Overkill is predictable. Suggestion: your internal heat regulation is stellar, but your mobility is severely compromised by sticky, non-flammable polymers. Perhaps invest in some specialized marshmallow solvent. Warning: you might smell faintly of caramel for the rest of the week. The Analyst. Izuku made his escape, leaving Endeavor screaming impotently, trapped in a giant, sticky foam cast. The spectacle that followed was immediate and total chaos. The fire alarms went off, but the fire department found no fire, only the number 1 hero, immobilized and spewing steam from a massive, foamy blob that looked suspiciously edible. It took a specialized hazmat crew, several hours, and massive volumes of industrial solvent to peel Endeavor out of the marshmallow foam. The entire process was filmed by news helicopters. The resulting news footage showed a red-faced, utterly humiliated Endeavor being meticulously scraped out of a sticky, white mound, his pride and reputation severely damaged. That night, Izuku watched the news report, happily eating a regular, and thankfully small, marshmallow, completely satisfied with the chaos he had caused. Shota Aizawa was running on sheer, furious willpower. The smell of Endeavor's embarrassment, residual burned ablative foam, still faintly permeated the UA staff lounge, mingling with the last remnants of his own catnip shame. The vigilante the analyst was escalating, and the heroes looked like a clown show. Aizawa had devised a new, unbreakable strategy: pure, brutal patience. We know the analyst targets mid-level operations on high-value nights, Aizawa explained to Hisashi Yamada, present Mike, and Nomuri Kiyama, midnight, all gathered in a grimy, abandoned surveillance van parked discreetly in a warehouse district alleyway. Netsu's analysis suggests the analyst will hit this specific arms depot tonight, Aizawa continued, tapping a map. Our job is to simply wait in the dark. No movement, no flashy attacks. We hit him when he thinks the area is secure. We beat his analysis with boredom. Midnight, sipping a large thermos, grinned. A sleepover. How intimate. But Eraser, this van smells like stale nicotine and regret. Aizawa ignored her. He looked at present Mike. Mike, you use your sound barrier to block out city noise. Midnight, your quirk is on standby. I handle the capture. Understood? We are silent, we are focused, and we are catching this glitter-tossing, foam-loving menace. Izuku Midoriya, meanwhile, was sitting in his dorm, watching the thermal output of the surveillance van's battery with great interest. A simple hack of the local power grid's maintenance schedule had told him exactly where Aizawa's team had parked their borrowed vehicle. They're going for a patient, low-energy stakeout, Izuku thought, checking his own latest gadget. They're already exhausted. It's too obvious. He finalized the construction of his newest, most passive-aggressive arsenal. The Sleepy Time Dispersers, 3 small, pressurized canisters designed to release an ultrafine mist of pharmaceutical-grade chamomile and lavender. The mist was colorless and odorless to anyone not actively straining their senses. The weighted blanket tubes, highly compressed, specialized fabric tubes that, when activated, would instantly inflate with warm air and then wrap themselves around anything they touched, providing the comforting, heavy pressure of a therapeutic weighted blanket. The Soothing Sound Drone, a tiny drone program to transmit an alternating playlist of whale song, Enya, and the soft, repetitive tapping of a fictional rainstorm directly into the UA comms frequency. A stakeout is supposed to be tense, Izuku muttered, zipping up his tactical suit. I think they could all use a little aggressive self-care. Izuku hit the arms depot, securing the criminals with his usual absurd efficiency, this time with magnetic goo that stuck them securely to a large metal door. He was done in 6 minutes. The real mission began now. He approached the stakeout van quietly, careful not to trigger Aizawa's hyper-alert paranoia. He moved around the perimeter and, with surgical precision, affixed the 3 Sleepy Time Dispersers to the van's intake vents. He activated them. Inside the cramped, smelly van, Aizawa frowned. Is it just me, or does this van suddenly smell floral? Oh, I think it's nice. Midnight stretched luxuriously. Very calming. Maybe one of us spilled their bath salts. Present Mike was already starting to look glassy-eyed. Why, like a nice, quiet, soft cloud. His volume knob seemed stuck on mellow. The chamomile and lavender mist was working its way through their systems, targeting their already depleted energy reserves. Their eyelids grew heavy. Then came the auditory attack. Izuku launched the Soothing Sound Drone. The minute he pressed the launch button, the comms link in their earpieces was hijacked. Aizawa's comm crackled, replacing the expected static with a gentle sound of rain tapping on a window pane, interspersed with a low, repeating, synthesized hymn of quiet contentment. What is that noise? Aizawa hissed, clutching his head. Oh, it's beautiful, Midnight sighed, leaning back against the passenger door. It's like the sound of all my worries being gently tucked away for the night. Present Mike, fully succumbing, whispered, It's Inya, man. The good stuff. I can feel the relaxation frequencies working on my inner ear. He slid down in his seat, his head resting against the door. Aizawa tried to activate his quirk, but the overwhelming sense of peace and extreme exhaustion was crippling. He tried to open his eyes wide, but the comforting warmth of the van, the soothing scents, and the gentle music were an unbearable combination. His red eyes flickered and dimmed. He felt his head dipping just slightly. Izuku knew he had a small window. He crept to the van's side door and, with a quick, silent wrench, popped the latch. He threw the 3 weighted blanket tubes into the van. The tubes inflated instantly with warm air, deploying a heavy, thick layer of specialized fleece over the 3 incapacitated heroes. The blankets settled over the heroes with therapeutic pressure. Midnight, who was already half asleep, simply gave a contented, sleepy sigh, nestled into the sudden warmth, and was gone. Present Mike, now completely covered, mumbled, so soft, like a massive, fuzzy hug from a friend. Aizawa was the only one still fighting. He was completely trapped under the weight of the blanket, struggling with the sudden, overwhelming warmth and pressure that felt dangerously good. No, I have to stay awake, Aizawa grunted, trying to claw the blanket off, but the weight was perfectly distributed, holding him still and warm. Izuku watched as Aizawa's last vestiges of resistance faded. Aizawa stopped struggling, his breathing evened out, and his final, muffled word before drifting off was a pathetic, weary whisper. Izuku quietly shut the van door, ensuring it was latched from the outside. The pro-heroes were defeated not by villains, but by aggressive self-care. Izuku stood back, surveying his work. He pulled a small, laminated card from his pocket. He taped it prominently to the van's windshield. Analytic report, Pro-Hero Stakeout, Strategy Failure. Error, underestimation of the need for adequate sleep and nutritional support. Observation, passive surveillance requires peak focus, which is severely compromised by exhaustion, lactuca virosa derivatives, and Enya. Suggestion, your current patrol cycle is statistically unsustainable. Please accept this temporary mandated rest PRD. The villains have been zip-tied 3 blocks away. Don't worry, Nedzu will understand. Izuku then pulled out a pre-made prop, a small, empty, glass bottle labeled, warm milk, extra soothing. He left it leaning against the tire. He vanished into the night, leaving the van containing the 3 top pro-heroes of Japan. Aizawa, gently snoring under a fuzzy blanket, Midnight, utterly peaceful, and Present Mike, mumbling happily about soft clouds, all while Enya's soothing strains leaked faintly from their abandoned comms. The next morning, a bewildered patrol officer found the van, and the sight of the 3 pro-heroes having a deep, warm nap, covered in blankets, was immediately the focus of the biggest, most chaotic news story of the month. The Pro-Hero Commission offices were not a place for marshmallow foam or lullabies. They were a place of serious, polished chrome, and cold, hard logic. After the embarrassing public spectacle of the pro-hero sleepover, which had trended globally under the hashtag eraser snore, the commission decided the pros were too emotionally compromised to handle the Analyst. They deployed the Specialized Vigilante Threat Assessment Unit, SVTAU, a team of analysts, not heroes, dedicated to solving problems with data, not fire or glitter. The SVTAU quickly dismissed the physical evidence as childish distraction. Their lead analyst, a severe woman named Agent Rio, focused on the one recurring, anomalous variable mentioned in nearly every pro-hero testimony, Izuku Midoriya's mumbling. Every data point suggests the analyst is an intellectual of staggering, chaotic genius, Agent Rio stated, tapping a screen displaying Izuku's flustered profile. And yet, pro-hero reports indicate this Midoriya child engages in constant, high-speed, analytical self-talk. We hypothesize that this mumbling is not a nervous tic, but a subconscious, real-time articulation of the analyst's tactical planning. The unit's new, highly sensitive, miniature acoustic surveillance systems were immediately installed across UA, covertly placed inside ventilation S, behind power outlets, and even woven into the fiber of the 1A classroom curtains. Their sole purpose, to capture, filter, and decipher every single syllable of Izuku Midoriya's mumbling. Izuku, unsurprisingly, detected the new surveillance within hours. The acoustic sensors were far too precise, drawing too much low-level power from the local grid. He found the telltale signature immediately. It was a focused, high-band transmission that was almost certainly filtering sound for specific frequencies. "They're listening to me," Izuku realized, trying not to hyperventilate. "They're not looking for gadgets. They're looking for my thoughts." This was the closest call yet. His mumbling was his core defense. It was where he processed his world. If they deciphered even one actual tactical analysis, his entire double life would crumble. Izuku knew he couldn't stop mumbling. The habit was too deeply ingrained. He also couldn't stop the surveillance. Therefore, he had only one choice: data sabotage via extreme, intentional nonsense. That evening, Izuku sat down at his desk in the common room, a glass of water nearby, and prepared to ruin the Commission's expensive analysis software. He began mumbling with his usual intense, frantic energy, but the content was now utterly, hysterically random. Inside the SVTAU's heavily guarded remote command center, Agent Rio watched the initial data stream with excitement. "The subject is active," she reported. "Mumbling speed is 400 words per minute. Initial transcription commencing." The computer screen began to fill with text, supposedly Izuku's vital analysis. The primary weakness of the Golden Age villain, the Tickler, was his over-reliance on velvet textures, requiring a countermeasure of pure, unscented industrial soap flakes, mixed precisely with exactly 3/8 a cup of semi-skimmed milk. No, wait, if the butter is unsalted, the crust density will require a temperature correction of -18 degrees Celsius, otherwise, the pate en croûte will suffer catastrophic structural integrity failure before the final rising. Agent Rio frowned, adjusting her headset. "Filter that. The system is conflating culinary planning with tactical analysis. Focus on the mathematical terms." The computer quickly highlighted the numbers and codes. "Must remember the 5 pillars of Byzantine architecture." The Emperor Zeno used a 3:7 ratio for his flank positioning, which suggests the new pro-hero Fat Gums diet requires a minimum daily intake of 400 grams of purple cauliflower, or his metabolic rate will invert, causing a localized surge of low-level emotional despair in nearby civilians, which is not ideal for Tuesday patrols, unless it is a leap year. The SVTAU system flagged the data as contradictory and highly non-coherent. Izuku, thoroughly enjoying the chaos he was causing, ramped up the absurdity in the classroom the next day. He sat through present mix English lesson, filling his notebook with actual hero notes in one hand, while muttering pure, dense confusion into the waiting surveillance system. And therefore, the optimum escape trajectory from All Might's Nebraska smash is precisely 3.14 miles due south, assuming the trajectory is calculated using a base 12 numerology system, and we must also consider that the talking bear from that obscure 1980s cartoon has a hidden quirk that allows him to control the global supply chain of licorice, which must be factored into the strategic assessment of the next urban redevelopment project. The SVTAU command center was melting down. The analysts were facing a logical breakdown. The data streams were constantly suggesting Izuku was simultaneously planning a jewel heist, designing a complex souffle recipe, debating 17th century French philosophy, and calculating the precise angle needed to throw a pencil into space. "The data is useless." Agent Rio slammed her fist on the console. "There is no pattern. The subject is mentioning endeavor in one sentence and then detailing the proper fermentation process for kimchi in the next. The analysis software is running at 99% capacity trying to reconcile villain tactics with pastry baking." A junior analyst, eyes wide with terror, pointed to the screen. "Agent Rio. The system is trying to categorize his last 10 minutes of mumbling. It has generated a probability report." The report flashed. Subject Midoriya, Izuku, mumbling analysis. Probability of being a highly advanced, coded communication system, 5%. Probability of being a real-time tactical analysis engine, 1%. Probability of being a dangerously high IQ individual experiencing an acute mental break due to unresolved academic anxiety, 94%. Agent Rio sighed, rubbing the bridge of her nose. "The system is concluding he's clinically unhinged." Our high-tech espionage determined the vigilante is a high school student who needs intense counseling, not capture. The SVTAU unit packed up their gear and withdrew from UA. The conclusion was filed. The mumbling is a unique, powerful psychological defense mechanism. It's not code, it's psychological noise, and attempting to decipher it leads to analytical insanity. Izuku, watching the signature of the SVTU's transmission drop off the grid, gave a genuine, relieved smile. He leaned back and started mumbling softly to himself, "Perfect. Now, about that pate and croûte recipe." Nedzu's office was quiet, the ambience of intellectual challenge replaced by a chilling realization. Aizawa, All Might, and Detective Tsukachi sat across from the principal, reviewing the compiled, utterly chaotic data provided by the failed SVTU unit. "We have pursued speed, stealth, high-tech quirk usage, and advanced psychological warfare," Nedzu summarized, pacing the room. "Every theory has led to a dead end. Every countermeasure has been defeated by an embarrassingly simple, physical, or obsolete solution. The analyst uses glue, glitter, pillows, and thermometers." Nedzu stopped, his eyes meeting Aizawa's. "My conclusion is devastatingly simple, yet highly unorthodox," Nedzu stated. "The analyst is not a powerful quirk user hiding their ability. The analyst is quirkless." The room fell into stunned silence. If the vigilante possessed a quirk, they would use it, even subtly, Nedzu explained, tapping the SVTAU report, the one concluding Izuku was having a mental break. "The reason they rely on external, non-lethal gadgets and systems is because they have no other means of offense or defense. Their entire method is built around exploiting the predictable complexity of quirk society, a world they are fundamentally excluded from." Tsukachi looked horrified. "But a quirkless individual operating a sophisticated hacking network and evading top pros? That requires unimaginable strategic genius." "Precisely," Nedzu smiled, but without mirth. "Their strategic genius is their only quirk. If this theory is correct, finding this individual is not a matter of looking for flashy abilities. It is a matter of finding a highly disenfranchised genius who learned to use the system's neglect of the quirkless as their ultimate weapon." Izuku Midoriya, secretly monitoring the meeting from a compromised speaker system in a UA janitorial closet, heard Nedzu's conclusion. His blood ran cold. This was not a comical defeat, this was total annihilation. The glitter bombs, the foam, the hilarious slumber party, all of it had inadvertently led Nedzu to the one truth that could not be exposed. If Nedzu released the quirkless analyst theory, the search would instantly narrow down to non-powered students with high academic profiles, or those who had been overlooked. If they discovered he used to be quirkless, was when he started, Izuku would be found in days. "I have 5 minutes, Izuku thought, his mind racing at a terrifying speed. "I have 5 minutes before Nedzu finalizes the theory and sends it to the commission. I have to create a spectacle so vast, so loud, and so visually overpowering that it forces them to conclude that only a large-scale, powerful quirk could be responsible." This required his final, most elaborate chaos weapon, Project Moby D-. Izuku simultaneously activated 4 major, pre-planted hack programs and 1 custom-made gadget from his utility belt. In the Mizudafu City Surveillance Center, lights began to flash wildly as multiple environmental systems failed. Izuku's first hack, he had remotely overridden the automated locks and release valves on 4 major, city supply water storage tanks located across Mizudafu. The tanks didn't empty, but the sudden, massive, unauthorized water release was the cue. In the waters of the major Mizudafu River, hundreds of large, brightly colored, heavily weighted storage containers, previously disguised as buoys, burst open. Inside, thousands upon thousands of highly durable, inflatable, 3-meter-tall rubber ducks instantly self-inflated and began bobbing merrily into the main current. The city landscape was instantly invaded by a silent, enormous, ridiculously cheerful armada of giant plastic fowl. Simultaneously, Izuku's second hack went live. All major digital billboards across the metropolitan area, every towering screen and advertising panel were hijacked. Instead of ads, the screens began flashing an intense, strobing image of a bizarre, complex, ancient Greek cipher interspersed with a repeating message. The convergence is imminent. Seek the yellow fleet. The effect was instantaneous, confusing, and overwhelming. Public reaction, pedestrians screamed. Traffic stopped. People looked at the sky and the river, utterly baffled by the sight of giant, plastic bath toys gliding past flashing, coded warnings. Hero reaction, sirens blared across the city. The chaos was too massive to ignore. Back in Nedzu's office, the meeting was immediately suspended. Principal! Tsukachi shouted, pointing at the news feed, which showed a wide shot of the river clogged with smiling, enormous yellow ducks. This is a simultaneous citywide attack. Control of water systems and the entire digital advertisement network. The city is in visual and intellectual lockdown. Aizawa, energized by the clear, physical threat, grabbed his capture weapon. The scale of this attack is massive. Only a quirk that can control mass and influence electronics over vast distances could achieve this. We need to find the source. Nedzu stared at the screen, his brilliant mind momentarily stunned by the sheer, unbridled, large-scale absurdity. His theory, the elegant, simple truth of the quirkless genius, shattered under the weight of hundreds of giant, floating rubber ducks and flashing Greek ciphers. It is a mass quirk event, Nedzu conceded, frustration evident in his voice. The analyst is clearly trying to overwhelm our systems with misdirection. They are deliberately creating an image of immense power. This is far beyond the capabilities of an individual reliant only on gadgetry. The investigation was reset. The focus shifted entirely from searching for a discrete quirkless anomaly to locating the user of an overwhelming, large-scale object manipulation digital hacking quirk. Izuku, watching the news from his room, now listening to police dispatch focus exclusively on duck retrieval and cipher decryption, finally relaxed. He had won. He hadn't just escaped detection. He had actively defined his own impossible, magnificent, and entirely fake new quirk persona, a persona now hidden behind a mountain of plastic foul. He pulled out his notebook and added a final note under Project Moby D-. Final analysis. The truth is too simple. The best way to hide a quirkless vigilante identity is to create the largest, most visually aggressive fake quirk possible. Safety rating. Secure. Note to self. Use smaller ducks next time. They are surprisingly heavy. The morning after the Great Floating Rubber Duck Armada was a day of mass public confusion and pro-hero despair. Helicopters were still fishing 3-meter-tall inflatable ducks out of the bay, and every pro was mandated to carry a waterproof net. Izuku Midoriya sat in Class 1A, utterly and beautifully wrecked. His exhaustion was so profound that it had looped back around to a strange, suppressed, wired alertness. He had pulled off a citywide, multi-layered operation, his masterpiece, and the internal high was crashing hard. Ochako Uraraka, sitting next to him, was worried. Izuku was always tired, but today he looked like he was vibrating on 3 hours of sleep and pure analytical caffeine. "Deku-kun, are you sure you're okay?" she whispered. "You look like you're fighting a losing battle against gravity." Izuku forced a bright, but completely unconvincing, smile. "Oh, Uraraka-san. Just a very complex theoretical physics project. Lots of variables, you know." Uraraka eyed him. She knew Izuku was a genius, but today, his eyes held a strange, triumphant glint that contradicted his severe eye bags. It wasn't the look of a student who aced a test, it was the look of a general who had just won a secret war. The class television flashed on, showing Detective Tsukachi giving a grim press conference about the unprecedented scale and absurdity of the attack. When the footage cut to an overhead shot of the river, choked with the massive yellow ducks, the class erupted in confusion and laughter. "Those are huge," Kirishima bellowed. "What kind of quirk even does that?" Izuku didn't laugh or look confused. He frowned slightly, his lips moving silently, then gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod of professional approval. It was the movement of someone analyzing an outcome, not a surprise. Uraraka didn't miss it. Later, during a quiet lunch in the common room, Izuku retreated to a corner to catch up on notes. In reality, he was conducting a final wipe-down of his boots, which had come into direct contact with the release mechanisms of the duck buoys. The yellow polymer was designed to be dense and extremely resilient, meant to survive saltwater and urban impacts. He thought he had been thorough, but exhaustion was a cruel mistress. As he stuffed his backpack under the table, a tiny, thumbnail-sized shard of the bright yellow polymer, sharp-edged and slightly tacky, snagged on the coarse fabric of his tactical pants and fell to the floor, unnoticed by him. Uraraka was walking past, humming softly, when her foot scuffed against something bright on the floor. She paused, then bent down and picked up the piece. It was unlike any plastic she had ever felt. It was too dense, too tough, and had a strange, artificial tackiness that felt almost industrial. It was the exact shade of yellow as the rubber ducks dominating the news feed. Uraraka frowned, turning the tiny shard over and over in her fingers. Where did this come from? She casually glanced at the table Izuku was at. He was now frantically packing his bag, looking intensely preoccupied. Before Uraraka could ask, Tenya Ida arrived, chopping his arm sharply with the force of his latest concern. Midori Yakuin. I must reiterate the need for organization. The great floating fowl fiasco has demonstrated the dire consequences of unregulated, chaotic engineering. Ida declared, assuming, as always, that Izuku was somehow tangentially responsible for the ducks through his secret support items. Therefore, I need an immediate update on your hydrostatic buoyancy compensator design. Your schedule states you were to analyze fluid resistance this morning. Izuku, mentally reeling from Ida's assumption and the physical demand of catching up on sleep, went into full panic mumble mode. WWL, Ida-kun, the initial hydrostatic buoyancy compensator design, while theoretically sound, failed to account for the non-Newtonian flow rate on the eastern bank of the Muzutafu River, and the hydrostatic seal on the primary vessel experienced a 0.002 millibar pressure drop upon initial deployment, which requires an immediate recalculation of the release mechanism, and therefore, the structural integrity of the polyvinyl acetate containment shell must be re-evaluated to prevent premature fragmentation, and then, factoring in the localized turbulence, we need to ensure the anti-radar coating on the final deployment unit remains intact for at least 4 hours. He finished his torrent of information, breathing heavily, completely unaware that he had just merged his complicated lie with multiple direct, technical references to the duck operation. Uraraka, standing frozen a meter away, heard every single word. She looked from the tiny, yellow, density-defying polymer fragment in her hand, a piece of the duck, to Izuku's sweat-drenched, exhausted face, which was detailing the duck's hydrostatic seal and anti-radar coating. A slow, terrifying, and utterly glorious realization dawned on her face. Hydrostatic seal. Anti-radar coating. Non-Newtonian flow rate. She looked at the giant ducks on the news feed. She looked at her brilliant, sweet, perpetually tired best friend. A wide, slightly shocked grin spread across her face. Deku-kun, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ooh, you're the one who threw the glitter at Hawks, aren't you? Izuku froze, his panicked eyes finally meeting hers. He opened his mouth, ready to fabricate another glorious lie, but no sound came out. The jig, it seemed, was spectacularly up. The empty classroom smelled faintly of chalk dust and impending doom. Ochako Uraraka had closed the door and was standing guard, her expression a mix of awe and stern disappointment. Don't lie, Deku-kun, she said, holding up the tiny, sharp, yellow polymer shard. This is a piece of the hydrostatic buoyancy compensator. The one from the giant floating fowl fiasco. Izuku felt the walls closing in. He opened his mouth, prepared to launch into a brilliant, panicked explanation involving high-density support polymers and a fictional collaboration with Mei Hatsum, but Uraraka cut him off. I heard you mumble the word non-lethal after you mentioned the anti-radar coating, she pressed, her eyes soft but serious. And the glitter, Deku. The news said the glitter was static-charged and impossible to remove from synthetic fabrics. That's not a hero's quirk, that's an engineer's joke. You are the analyst. Izuku's shoulders slumped. He couldn't lie to her. Not when she had pieced together the impossible truth from discarded plastic and confused whispers. The adrenaline from the hack finally vanished, leaving him utterly defenseless. "Weiss," he whispered, his voice trembling. He sank into a desk chair, covering his face. "Yes, it's me. I'm the one who covered Hawks in glitter and trapped Endeavor in a giant marshmallow. I'm the vigilante. I had to do it, Uraraka-san. The system is too slow and I have to use my analysis to save people the heroes miss. It's the only way I can use my brain to be a hero right now." Before Uraraka could comfort him, the door burst open. Tenya Ida, his arms chopping with frantic energy, marched in. "Midori Yakuen, I found you. We must immediately discuss the failure of your buoyancy system to account for tidal variation. I have updated your schedule to reflect." Ida stopped dead as his brain registered the words hanging in the air, "Vigilante." Ida froze, his arms mid-chop. He looked at Izuku's defeated face, Uraraka's protective stance, and then back at Izuku. "A vigilante?" Ida's voice rose to a horrified pitch. "Midori Yakuen, that is a massive violation of the hero code. It is unauthorized, it is dangerous, and it undermines the very foundation of societal order." "But Ida-kun, he's not hurting anyone." Uraraka rushed to defend. "He just makes the villains look silly and the heroes look exhausted. He's fighting the League." Ida stopped his lecture, his mind cycling through data points. Unauthorized. Fighting the League. Non-lethal. Glitter. He remembered his own reckless, rule-breaking dash for vengeance against Stain. He remembered how Stain had exposed the flaws in the hero system, highlighting those who sought glory over justice. Ida closed his eyes, took a deep, shuddering breath, and lowered his arms. His voice was now solemn, the lecture tone replaced by grave conviction. "The hero code demands we respect the law. However, true heroism demands we save lives," Ida stated, looking at Izuku. "Your methods are anarchic, Midori Yakuen, but your intent is pure. You possess the greatest analytical mind in the country, and you are wasting it on hiding your activities. I cannot report you. I cannot condone this." He paused, then declared, chopping his hand decisively, "But if you insist on operating outside the law, you will do so with structure, organization, and a rigorously drafted rule book. Midori Yakuen, I am joining your unit. We will bring order to this chaos." Before Ida could pull out his clipboard, the door creaked open again. Shoto Todoroki stood in the doorway, a half-empty cup of soba noodles in his hand, his dual-colored eyes placidly assessing the situation. "Your voices are too loud," Todoroki stated simply. He glanced at Uraraka. "You found out about the glitter, didn't you?" The three gaped at him. "You left a fragment of the marshmallow foam on the common room carpet," Todoroki explained, taking a quiet slurp of noodles. "It was highly heat-resistant, non-toxic, and felt like a giant, solidified sugar cube. The only person in this class who uses non-lethal technology of that complexity to defeat a pro-hero is Midoriya." He put down the cup. "I believe the goal of a hero is to defeat villains efficiently. Midoriya's current method is the most efficient and the least messy. If we are fighting the League, this is the most logical strategy. I am joining the unit." Just then, Tsuyu Azui poked her head around the corner. "Karo, I thought I heard Ida-kuen's voice at top volume. So Midoriya-chan is the analyst?" "I suspected as much, Karo. You're always the smartest person in the room, Midoriya-chan." She hopped inside. "I trust your heart, Midoriya-chan. And I'm good at stealth and carrying things. I'm in, Karo." The newly formed vigilante support unit sat down around the desk, their academic textbooks pushed aside for secret plans. Izuku, still slightly shell-shocked by the speed of their acceptance, looked at his four greatest friends. "We need a name," Uraraka declared, her eyes shining with newfound mischief. "No, we need a charter of conduct." Ida snapped, already pulling out a massive, intimidating notebook. "Midori Yakuen, you are the tactical lead analyst. Your job is pure strategy and gadget development. Uraraka-kun, your gravity quirk makes you reconnaissance and vertical mobility. Todoroki-kun, your dual quirk is perfect for containment and environmental control. Ida pointed at Tsu. Azui-kun, your stealth and aquatic abilities make you the infiltration and extraction specialist. He pointed at himself. I will be the deployment strategist and moral compass, ensuring all operations adhere to the vigilante code of nonviolence and maximum inconvenience. Izuku grinned, feeling the weight of the solo operation lift instantly. We are going to be a problem. A really big, really hilarious problem. Ida slapped his hand down. Our first rule, absolutely no lethal force. Our second rule, operations must achieve maximum, disorienting chaos. Our third rule, always be back in the dorm before 4 a.m. Their mission had evolved from solo stealth to team chaos. The entire underworld and the pro-hero community had no idea what was coming. The Analyst was now a squad. The UA dorms were quiet, but behind the closed door of Izuku's room, chaos was being organized with the precision of a master clockmaker. 5 students huddled around a massive, color-coded map of the city. The target is the Flipper, Izuku, the tactical lead analyst, stated, tapping a villain profile. He uses his minor elasticity quirk to escape through ventilation and plumbing systems. He's been operating in the sewer network for 6 months, untouchable by pro-heroes who can't fit in the pipes. Ida, the deployment strategist, pointed to his own meticulously organized plan, which was printed in 12-point font. According to Vigilante Charter Addendum 4, Section B, we must achieve non-lethal containment using 3 distinct points of failure. Uraraka-kun, your vertical mobility will be the initial distraction. Azui-kun, your infiltration is key to deployment. Karo, I've already lubricated the deployment cylinders with high-grade, non-toxic slime. Tsu confirmed, sounding utterly professional about her disgusting task. Todoroki-kun, Izuku continued, pointing to a central intersection. Your containment will be necessary to block the main sewer exit. We need a massive ice barrier, but it must be easily melted by the local fire brigade. No permanent damage. Todoroki nodded, his expression as placid as ever. Easily melted. Understood. I will use the 3-to-1 water ratio as detailed in the Containment Protocol Addendum 6. Uraraka, her eyes alight with excitement, looked at the schematics. So, I distract the pro-heroes while the rest of the team traps the villain in a pipe that's lined with non-toxic anti-elastic goo? This is so much more fun than calculus. The operation, which Izuku had codenamed Operation Drain Stopper, went off with the beautiful, terrible precision only Ida could enforce. Tsu, the infiltration specialist, slipped into the sewer access tunnel moments before the villain's predicted escape, lining the pipes with a sticky, non-setting polymer designed to negate elasticity. Uraraka, providing vertical mobility, used her quirk to lift an enormous, discarded dumpster onto the street near the main exit, creating a massive, confusing diversion that drew the attention of the nearest pro-hero patrol manual, Ida's former intern mentor, known for being annoyingly detail-oriented and quick to criticize. Manual, seeing the gravity anomaly, rushed forward, prepared to lecture the mysterious vigilante on the dangers of street litter. Vigilante! Cease your reckless endangerment of sanitation vehicles. Manual shouted, his water quirk on standby. But Manual was already too late. As he rushed toward the dumpster, Izuku, perched invisibly on a ledge, fired a small, silent projectile, the super slick slime sphere. 3. Manual took one step and instantly lost traction, his arms flailing wildly as he slid at maximum speed. He was caught, however, not by a wall, but by Tsu, who had emerged quietly from a manhole cover. Tsu, using her incredible tongue dexterity, grabbed Manual's belt buckle with a sticky, reinforced section of her tongue, coated in the same non-toxic polymer. She lifted him high and gently pressed him against the slick, brick wall, leaving him utterly immobile and sticking to the masonry. Manual was trapped, stuck to a wall by a sticky frog tongue, staring at a floating dumpster, all while the flipper was being sealed inside the sewer network by an ice plug courtesy of Todoroki. As Ida and Izuku secured the villain, Ida stopped for a moment to look at Manual, stuck like an insect on a collector's board. Manuel-sensei, Ida called out, his voice utterly devoid of humor, we regret the inconvenience. We have neutralized the threat. I recommend you wait for the fire brigade. They have specialized non-solvent polymer removal sprays. You should have adhered to the non-intervention code. And with that, the team vanished, leaving Manuel stuck to a wall, his water cork useless against the dry, sticky polymer, staring at a perfectly preserved, floating dumpster. The next day in UA, the Deku squad had a new, palpable energy. They sat together at lunch, discussing the mission in low, fast whispers using coded language that made no sense to anyone else. The 3-to-1 water ratio was highly effective for the plug, Todoroki-kun, but your steam distribution was 0.04 seconds too slow to clear the field, Ida critiqued, reviewing his notes. Noted, Todoroki replied, sipping his cold soba. I will adjust my internal regulator to account for the pipe's internal humidity. This subtle shift in their dynamics, their unnerving, highly efficient teamwork was intensely noticed by the rest of the class, especially Bakugo, who could sense competence like a heat-seeking missile. The change reached its peak during a hero training mock battle. Bakugo was engaged in a furious, loud offensive against Kirishima, launching excessive, booming explosions in a confined area. Bakugo roared, preparing his biggest move, "Get out of the way, shitty hair." AP shot. Before Bakugo could fire, a massive wave of ice erupted, not around Bakugo, but directly in front of him and then curling around his back, perfectly encasing his lower body and arms in a thick, non-damaging layer of ice that perfectly stopped his aggressive trajectory. Todoroki stood 20 feet away, his expression bored. He was not targeting Kirishima, he was performing containment. Bakugo, your aggressive, large-scale trajectory was detrimental to the integrity of the training environment, Todoroki stated simply, referencing Ida's charter rule about environmental control. Containment was necessary to enforce perimeter integrity. The entire class, seeing the explosive Bakugo encased mid-rant in an immovable block of ice, burst into uncontrollable laughter. Bakugo, trapped and humiliated, was shaking with white-hot rage that couldn't even melt the containment ice quickly enough. You icy hot bastard. What the hell was that? You're working together now. What stupid scheme are you four plotting? He bellowed, struggling against the ice. Izuku rushed forward, feigning concern, but was actually analyzing the structural integrity of Todoroki's ice. Bakugo screamed, "Deku, you're in on this, aren't you? What's your angle, you pathetic, mumbling nerd?" Izuku, distracted by the perfect execution of the containment protocol, accidentally let slip his analytical thought process, mixing his school persona with his vigilante role. Kaken, the structural integrity of Shotokuin's ice composition is actually highly efficient. He achieved optimal containment radius at a thermal gradient of only -5 degrees. This method completely nullifies large-scale, volatile damage and is much faster than waiting for pro-hero intervention. Bakugo froze. Optimal containment radius. Pro-hero intervention. He stared at Izuku's suddenly terrified eyes, then at Todoroki's serene face, and then at Uraraka and Ida, who were both suddenly pretending to examine a chip tile on the floor. A terrifying truth, even more shocking than the giant rubber ducks, began to form in Bakugo's explosive mind. These four weren't just a study group. They were operating on a different level. And it was driving him insane. Katsuki Bakugo was operating at peak fury. He knew the Deku squad was hiding a secret, and the silent, terrifying efficiency of their recent teamwork, and the public humiliation he'd suffered, proved it was massive. He had been quietly following them, using his explosions to propel himself silently over the rooftops to the common areas whenever they convened their secret meetings. Tonight, the target was the dorm's rooftop access, where the 5 of them had gathered. Bakugo, hidden behind a large ventilation unit, was ready to listen. Izuku, however, had long ago tagged Bakugo's boots with a micro-tracker disguised as a speck of industrial ash, a precautionary measure against any sudden, explosive confrontations. He received the alert, Kaken, proximity alert, 4 meters, high-angle surveillance. Izuku looked at his team. Tenyukuen, Katsuki is active. Deploy containment scenario Gamma 7. Ida nodded grimly. Understood. We initiate the emotional misdirection protocol. The group immediately dropped their discussion of non-lethal bear traps and launched into the most baffling, bizarre performance they could muster. The thermal regulation is spiking, Midoriyakuen. Ida yelled, forgetting his clipboard and dramatically clutching Todoroki's hand. Your vital signs are showing massive internal conflict. Remember your breathing exercises. Todoroki, who had been discussing the viscosity of the new slime spheres, immediately contorted his face into an expression of intense, yet oddly serene, suffering. He began to hum softly. The dichotomy is overwhelming. I don't know which side to push with. The fire. Or the ice. Uraraka, tears welling up on command, knelt by Todoroki's side. Be brave, Shotokuen. This is harder than defeating the League. You have to choose. One side or the other. Don't let the internal conflict tear you apart. Todoroki let out a loud, drawn-out cry that sounded suspiciously like a cat being stepped on. It's too much. The ice is freezing the fire. The fire is boiling the ice. I don't know if I'm going to have a boy or a girl. Bakugo, listening intently behind the vent, suddenly heard a distinct, wet squelch. He was completely derailed. What the F? They're having a weird therapy session? Why the hell is Icy Hot having a kid? Sue, providing the hilarious denouement, patted Todoroki's head. Karo, Midoriya-chan says you need to focus on your trauma. Push, Shoto-chan. Push out the unresolved familial issues, Karo. Bakugo retreated, utterly traumatized and completely convinced that whatever chaos the Deku Squad was planning, it involved a terrifyingly dysfunctional PRDNSY and a weird therapy group, not vigilantism. While Bakugo wrestled with the idea of a half-ice, half-fire baby, the Deku Squad moved on to their actual target, a deserted pier where Nedzu and Aizawa had placed a sophisticated, optical-based sensor grid designed to detect even the slightest movement or quirk usage. They were looking for a single, small anomaly. They are looking for one person, operating in stealth, hiding their quirk, Izuku analyzed. We give them multiple, obvious, confusing targets. Nedzu and Aizawa were watching the optical feed from a remote van. Patience, Aizawa, Nedzu chirped. The sensor grid will detect any particle displacement. We will capture the analyst in the act of infiltration. Part 3. The split-second split trap. Suddenly, the sensor feed registered a clear target, Todoroki, standing perfectly still in the middle of the pier, using his quirk. Got him. Aizawa snapped, reaching for his capture weapon. He's using his ice. Todoroki had indeed used his quirk, but only to create a small, perfectly sized ice barrier around the most valuable UA surveillance drone. At that exact, calculated moment, Ida, using his engine quirk at maximum burst speed, deployment strategist, sprinted past the pier. As he passed, he tossed an enormous, shimmering, non-toxic banner right over a visible sensor camera. The banner read, "Bait detected. Try harder." Before Aizawa could even register the insult, Uraraka, utilizing her extreme vertical mobility, soared high above the pier. With a silent clap, she released hundreds of self-propelled, low-altitude balloons filled with a specialized, non-toxic blue hair dye designed for rapid release and maximum dispersal. The dye cloud was perfectly calculated to drift downwind, directly onto Aizawa's hidden observation post on the adjacent rooftop. Aizawa, who hadn't even had time to fully erase Todoroki's quirk, was instantly engulfed in a thick, sticky cloud of vibrant blue dye. His dark hair, his capture weapon, and his signature yellow sleeping bag were saturated in the humiliating, indelible color. On the screen, Nedzu watched the bait detected sign, then the drone's telemetry feed instantly exploded into chaotic, unreadable numbers. Aizawa, report. Nedzu demanded. Aizawa's comm crackled, filled with static and dripping dye. His voice was a low, guttural growl. I am blue, Nedzu. I am covered in non-toxic, non-removable, blue hair dye. They used a distraction. They split the attack. They knew we were looking for one source. Nedza leaned back, massaging his temples. They're a team. And they have a perverse sense of humor. The containment, ice. The speed, Ida banner. The mobility, Uraraka die. They utilized every function. The complexity of the simultaneous deployment suggests an analyst coordinating a team of highly proficient quirk users. The quirkless theory was now completely dead, replaced by the far more comfortable but still terrifying notion that UA had a rogue team of genius teenagers operating as the bait detectors. Meanwhile, back in the dorms, Bakugo was still reeling. He watched the Deku squad gather their things, Izuku looking mildly concerned, Todoroki rubbing his shoulder as if recovering from an intense ordeal. Midoriya, your deployment strategic model was effective, Ida stated crisply. The containment was perfect, Izuku replied, trying not to laugh. And Shoto-kun, your emotional performance was highly convincing. Bakugo, hearing the words deployment strategic model and emotional performance side by side, slammed his head against the common room table. They're a highly organized, trauma-based drama club. He concluded, utterly defeated by the chaos. The Deku squad's cover was safe for now. They had convinced him that they were just a trauma-based drama club. Shota Aizawa was a study in profound, colorful misery. The industrial-strength blue hair dye had proven resistant to every known solvent, bleach, and chemical compound UA could muster. He was now, officially, the Blue Menace, an extremely tired, extremely blue, and extremely angry pro-hero. He had abandoned his usual capture weapon, opting instead for a pair of thick, rubber gloves, certain the vigilantes would deploy some sticky, irritating sludge on his next patrol. The analyst is no longer one person, Aizawa grated, his voice hoarse with exhaustion, during the mandatory staff meeting. It's a highly organized, highly effective cell operating with military-grade coordination and zero lethality. They are faster than us, and they are using our exhaustion against us. Meanwhile, Izuku and the team were planning their next operation. The target is the Shadow, Izuku announced, pointing to a profile. He relies entirely on darkness, stealth, and inducing fear in his victims. His quirk allows him to drain light from a 50-meter radius. He's difficult to engage as conventional pro-hero methods fail in total darkness. A simple villain, but a complex challenge for the system, Ida stated, adjusting his glasses. We must neutralize his environmental advantage using our charter of maximum sensory overload. Izuku pulled out his latest gadgets, the loud and bright blinders MK2. They were small, tactical emitters that pulsed high-lumen LED strobes and played a piercing, oscillating medley of party horns and air raid sirens. The Shadow was cornered in a deserted, warehouse basement, a perfect environment for his quirk. The basement was plunged into an impenetrable blackness, heavy with fear. Sue, the infiltration specialist, moved first. Her quirk was unaffected by darkness, and her superior stealth allowed her to slip behind the Shadow. She didn't attack. She silently planted 4 low-to-the-ground netting traps coated in industrial-grade, non-toxic tree sap, extremely sticky, completely safe. The Shadow, confident in his darkness, felt the ground shake as Ida, the deployment strategist, burst into the basement, moving too fast to be clearly seen. Ida, relying on Izuku's exact pre-calculated trajectory, was the DLVRY system. He swiftly affixed the 4 loud and bright blinders to the pillars surrounding the villain. Ida hit the activation switch and vanished. The darkness instantly exploded. The basement was assaulted by a terrifying, chaotic wave of piercing sound, the party horns and sirens, and blinding light, the high-lumen strobes. The Shadow, completely disoriented by the rapid shift from total darkness to sensory pandemonium, stumbled directly into the sticky netting. He was instantly immobilized, struggling desperately against the netting, while the strobes and party horns continued their assault. His quirk, which relied on the absence of light and the presence of fear, was useless against a sensory rave party. Finally, Todoroki, the containment specialist, appeared at the entrance. He didn't engage in a fight. He simply surrounded the immobilized villain and the netted pillars with a perfect, smooth ring of ice containment protocol, complete. Aizawa, the Blue Menace, operating on pure rage and accurate analytical prediction, arrived on the scene exactly 40 seconds later. He hit the roof access and dropped into the basement, his eyes glowing red, ready to erase the quirk of the source of the noise. He found himself staring at a surreal sight, a terrified, netted villain struggling against a perimeter of smooth ice, while 4 strobes pulsed and shrill party horns screamed at maximum volume. Aizawa erased the quirk of the struggling villain, but it was too late. The fight was over. He couldn't erase a blinking strobe or a sticky net. Suddenly, a voice rang out from the darkness above. Vertical mobility complete. Uraraka called down. She had used her quirk to lift the netted, blinking, loudly blaring villain up through the roof access and gently float him to the street above. Aizawa looked up, his blue features contorted in silent fury, just in time to hear the final, high-pitched whoosh of the air leaving the villain's makeshift balloon lift. Aizawa was left standing alone in the sticky, brightly lit basement, the party horns echoing deafeningly, with nothing to capture but his own escalating stress. A police cruiser was waiting outside. The officers stared in disbelief as a completely immobilized villain, screaming from sensory overload, gently floated down to the curb, courtesy of the invisible force. Sue, using her enhanced vision, saw Aizawa stomp out of the basement and deposit the final evidence. Aizawa found a small, laminated card attached to the pillar where the strobes were still blinking furiously. Analytic report, Pro Hero Eraser Head, response time. Intervention was 40.2 seconds too late to prevent the takedown. Observation, quirk negation is ineffective against gadgets. We neutralized the villain's quirk via sensory denial and immobilized him before you could deploy. Suggestion, we recommend a full costume replacement, as the blue dye is highly visible. See attached analysis of non-stick fabrics. Try harder, sensei. The Analyst. Aizawa slowly tore the card in half, his now blue hands shaking with suppressed violence. He knew precisely who these analysts were, a highly organized, highly intelligent, highly efficient group of teenagers who were treating the entire hero system like a personal training simulation. Meanwhile, back in the dorm, Izuku quickly checked his micro-tracker on Bakugo. It confirmed Bakugo was currently hiding in the dorm bathroom, trying to figure out if Todoroki's post-DLVRY anxiety was a new, dangerous quirk side effect, or just regular teen drama. The Deku Squad had won again. The Deku Squad's reign of chaotic, non-lethal terror was having a devastating effect on the Muzutafu criminal underworld. It wasn't just that villains were being caught, it was how they were being caught. Reports across the black market were bleak. The illegal quirk suppressant trade was down 70% after the Analyst team ruined 3 major transfers using specialized, non-stick netting that looked like oversized, brightly colored tennis rackets. The small-time jewel thieves were on strike, citing the persistent psychological trauma caused by the flashing strobe lights, party horns, and the overwhelming scent of lavender left at every crime scene. The most damning evidence was the rapid decline in recruitment. No aspiring criminal wanted to risk being immobilized by confectionery-themed foam or delivered to the police while covered in non-toxic goo and serenaded by whale songs. The pro-heroes were still struggling to organize, but the criminal economy was collapsing under the weight of absurdity. Deep within the League of Villains' hidden operational base, Shigaraki Tamura sat hunched over a distorted screen, scratching furiously at his neck. He was reviewing a highly irritating intelligence report. "This is noise, Kurogyri," Shigaraki whined, scattering the report pages. "The heroes are failing as always. Why are we talking about some brat who uses glitter? Just background static." "On the contrary, Shigaraki Tamura," Kurogyri responded, his voice smooth and unsettling. "The static is proving more effective than the hero's signal. Since the appearance of this analyst cell, which we now confirm operates as a team, our low-level resource flow has nearly ceased. The cost of replacing equipment, cleaning personnel, and treating emotional damage for our contractors is astronomical." Kurogyri projected a graph onto the wall. It showed the rising efficiency of the vigilante cell compared to the plummeting capture rate of the official pro-heroes. "The cell's methodology is tailored perfectly to defeat the common criminal," Kurogyri explained. They use speed, precision, and technology to neutralize mobility and sensory perception instantly, leaving no lasting damage, but ensuring maximum arrest potential. The Analyst cell is not fighting the heroes. They are systematically dismantling our entire recruitment and supply infrastructure. Shigaraki stopped scratching. His eyes, usually clouded by frustration, narrowed with cold realization. They're clearing the board for us. They're weeding the garden. Worse, Shigaraki-san. They are making villainy look undignified, Kurogyari corrected. The public sees a joke. We see a massive, structural weakness being exposed. Himiko Toga was perched on the back of a ragged sofa, swinging her legs and giggling at a grainy surveillance photo of the 3-meter-tall rubber ducks floating past a news crew. They're so much fun. Toga chirped. They make the heroes so mad, but they don't slice anyone up. They're playing. I like people who play. Dabi, leaning against a charred wall, scoffed. They're kids. Using stupid toys. We melt them. Their toys are highly effective, Dabi, Kurogyari intervened. The last containment unit, built specifically to trap a high-speed villain, used a specific, quick-setting ice ratio that analysis suggests can withstand over $1.50 times 10 to the power of 7 text pascals dollar of pressure before yielding. This is not amateur work. Toga suddenly focused on the data. They're smart and they like chaos. Maybe they need a new friend. I bet their dorm room is super fun. Her eyes lit up with predatory curiosity. I want to find out who the leader is. If they're this good at making people squirm, imagine what they could do if they were really mad. Shigaraki smiled, a disturbing cracked grin that split his dry lips. He finally saw the tactical solution. They are eliminating our minor distractions, he murmured. But that puts them at the top of the pile. They are a threat because they are efficient. We stop them by turning their own strategy against them. Shigaraki pointed directly at Toga. Toga, I want you to go into UA High School. I want you to find the source of the glitter and the sticky nets. They are hiding behind their systems, their rules, and their absurdity. You are the perfect countermeasure to their chaotic logic. Toga's eyes widened with delighted anticipation. I get to wear a school uniform? And meet new friends? And find out who makes the foam. Find out who the Analyst is, Shigaraki commanded. Infiltrate their unit. Gather intelligence on their strategy. Then, when the time is right, you expose them. This little game has gone on long enough. Toga jumped off the sofa, humming a cheerful, ominous tune. Ooh, a secret mission. I hope they have cute uniforms. The League of Villains had officially deemed the Deku Squad a threat. The game was about to get exponentially more dangerous, and Toga, the mistress of deception and disguise, was now heading straight for Class 1A. The stage was set for the ultimate showdown. Toga Himiko, currently disguised as a forgettable second-year general education student named Sakura, was having a marvelous time. UA High School was far more fascinating than she'd expected. Everyone was so brightly colored and dramatic, and yet, simultaneously so stressed about assignments. Toga, on orders from Shigaraki, was hunting the source of the persistent, high-efficiency chaos known as the Analyst. She quickly dismissed the pro-heroes as incapable of such cleverness. Her focus shifted to Class 1A, and specifically, the Deku Squad. She watched them closely for 3 days. She saw the weird, intense eye contact they shared. She saw Todoroki's unervingly focused attention on Izuku's seemingly random gestures. She saw Ida's rigid adherence to an unseen, internal timer. And she observed the trauma-based drama club cover. One afternoon, she watched Bakugo sneakily try to listen to the Deku Squad's private conversation, only for Uraraka to suddenly erupt into a dramatic sob, lamenting, "The structural flaws of my own self-worth are overwhelming the tensile strength of the friendship," while Ida frantically pulled out a schedule labeled, "Weekly Emotional Repair Time." Toga giggled silently. They are so weird. But Midoriya-kun is the focus. She noticed the quick, complex hand signals Izuku would use a twitch of the pinky, a specific adjustment of his glasses that would instantly change Ida's posture or Uraraka's direction. Izuku, the perpetually nervous student, was clearly the strategic core. The Deku squad had to plan their next mission, dealing with a villain who was stealing vital medicine using a gas quirk. They needed to deploy a complex filtration system, and the logistics were too complicated for the dorm room. They chose the UA library, specifically the ancient, deserted non-fiction annex on 17th century maritime law. "We must use code words, as per Charter Protocol 9, Ida whispered fiercely, adjusting his glasses. "The risk of detection is too high." Izuku, Uraraka, and Ida gathered around a massive, dusty book, pretending to study ship designs. Todoroki was studying nearby, acting as an early warning system. Tsu was absent, conducting real-time surveillance of the target zone. Toga, disguised in her student persona, was hiding between two immense stacks of books in the adjacent aisle, having subtly ingested the blood of a UA cleaning lady to perfect her current forgettable appearance. The gas filtration system requires 3 simultaneous deployment points, Izuku murmured, pointing to a diagram of a ship's rigging. VM, vertical mobility, you handle the roof deployment. C, containment environmental, you create the downdraft funnel. Affirmative, analyst, Uraraka whispered, checking her watch. Ida, ever the stickler for detail, spoke up, his voice hushed but intense. Analyst, a correction. Your deployment time for the rooftop vent is 0.8 seconds slower than the blue dye incident. We cannot afford that lapse. We must maintain maximum inconvenience for the villains. Izuku leaned closer, frustrated with the logistical hurdle. I know, Ida-kun, but the blue dye incident utilized a zero-gravity launch assist. This time we are dealing with a sealed vent. The League of Villains is escalating, we need to be perfect. It was the perfect storm of forbidden words, spoken in one high-pressure moment. Analyst. Blue dye incident. League of Villains. Toga's eyes, wide and ecstatic, darted between the stacks of books. She heard everything. Her twisted logic immediately processed the information. Conclusion 1. The analyst, they are using the vigilante's codename. Conclusion 2. Blue dye incident, they were involved in the humiliation of the pro-heroes. Conclusion 3. League of Villains, they are fighting us. Toga's mind snapped shut on a specific, terrifying misinterpretation. The Deku squad are the heroes who know the true identity and location of the vigilante, the analyst, and are using his past failures to devise a powerful counter-strategy against him. They weren't the vigilantes, they were the anti-vigilante strike force. They're going to catch him. Toga thought, horrified that her potential new playmate was about to be betrayed. She quietly slipped away, making her way to the nearest bathroom to change out of her disguise and contact the League. Within the hour, Toga was back at the League of Villains base, relaying her critical, yet flawed, intelligence. Shigaraki-san. I found them. The students. They know who the analyst is. They were talking about the blue dye, the containment, and the League. They're planning a massive trap for him. Toga reported breathlessly, utterly convinced of her interpretation. Shigaraki Tamura's fingers curled into claws. His eyes went wide with dangerous focus. The threat was not the vigilante. The threat was this group of high-functioning students who possessed the intelligence to track the chaos back to its source. They are smarter than Nedzu, Shigaraki hissed. They have the identity of our biggest problem. We cannot let that information leave UA. They're now the primary targets. Shigaraki smiled, a cold, predatory gesture. We need to expose this school for failing to contain their little geniuses. We need to lure out all might and destroy their hope. And we need to get the truth from those brats before they tell the heroes. He turned to Kurojairi. Prepare the Nomu. We are capturing Class 1A. The heroes will come running, and those students will tell us who the analyst is. The stage was set. Toga's accidental, hilarious eavesdropping had sealed the fate of Class 1A and initiated the final, massive confrontation. The League of Villains struck during a seemingly low-stakes field trip, a mandatory environmental cleanup exercise at a defunct, isolated water purification plant on the outskirts of Mizudafu. It was chosen by Aizawa specifically because it was boring, easily secured, and definitely not a known vigilante hotspot. Aizawa, still sporting a faint, furious blue tint to his hair, monitored the perimeter. He expected the vigilantes to show up with some non-flammable cleaning foam or personalized, anti-germ slime. He did not expect the League of Villains. The air shimmered and cracked. Kurogiri, utilizing his warp gate quirk on an unprecedented scale, instantaneously transported a massive, prepared force right into the middle of the Class 1A formation Nomu, Shigaraki, Dabi, and Twice. Chaos erupted. Class 1A, despite their training, was overwhelmed by the sheer, targeted ferocity of the attack. Within minutes, multiple warp gates secured the exits, and the students were forcibly contained. Aizawa launched himself into the fray, his eyes glowing red, erasing quirk after quirk. But the sheer number of villains and Nomu proved too much. A final, precise warp gate opened beneath Aizawa's feet, and he was transported miles away, landing, predictably, in a mountain of non-toxic, industrial-grade sticky goo, a gift from the League, knowing his sensitivity to the vigilante style. Class 1A was trapped, secured with high tensile restraints, and held inside the large, dilapidated purification facility. Shigaraki Tamura walked slowly through the ranks of the captured, terrified students. He stopped directly in front of Bakugo, who was straining against his restraints, screaming threats. "Which one of you is it? The one who talks too loud?" Shigaraki rasped, his eyes cold and menacing. "What the hell do you want, Bisudi?" Bakugo roared. "Trying to capture one for all? Not gonna happen." Shigaraki paused, utterly confused. He glanced at Dabi, then back at the students. "One for all? What are you talking about? We're not here for some stupid legacy quirk." He walked past Bakugo and stopped directly in front of the Deku squad Izuku, Ida, Uraraka, and Todoroki. Tsu, nearby, was quietly analyzing the structural weakness of her restraints. "We're here for the informants," Shigaraki stated, his voice gaining a chilling edge. "The ones who know the truth. The ones who are planning to betray him." He pointed a single, trembling finger directly at Izuku. "For the little group that uses codes and shares secrets. You're planning to expose the analyst. You've been tracking his humiliation tactics. Tell us who he is. We need that intelligence neutralized, or this school falls apart." The pro-heroes, who arrived moments later, All Might, Endeavor, Midnight, Nedzu, were watching the scene unfold on hastily deployed surveillance monitors outside the facility, utterly baffled by Shigaraki's focus. "They're not targeting All Might?" Endeavor thundered. "They are targeting those 4 students because they know the vigilante's identity?" Nedzu's brilliant eyes narrowed. "The League perceives the Analyst as a greater, more pressing threat than One for All. And they believe the Deku squad possesses the key to that threat. This is entirely an intelligence operation motivated by the Analyst's success." Inside the facility, the Deku squad exchanged horrified, panicked glances. Uraraka's thought, "Oh no." Toga misunderstood the trauma-based drama club. She thought we were discussing catching Deku-kun, not making him a better vigilante. Ida's thought, "The entire league has been mobilized based on an error in communication regarding Vigilante Charter Addendum 9. The stakes are astronomical." Todoroki's thought, "This is inefficient. We are all captured because the enemy misinterpreted our secret, highly functional internal system." Izuku, however, was no longer nervous. His internal analyst took over. "Izuku's analysis, the League is here for us. They think our secrets are the key to their survival. All for One will appear, seeking to neutralize the strategic threat. This is not a hostage situation. It is a forced public interrogation. We are the main event." He looked at his team, his eyes filled with a sudden, calm determination. He didn't need to whisper. The secret was already out. "Toga misinterpreted the containment protocol," Izuku said, his voice quiet but clear. "The enemy thinks we are their target. We are the reason they are here." Shigaraki tilted his head, intrigued by the student's sudden confidence. "So you admit it? You know who he is?" Izuku met his gaze. "Yes, Shigaraki. We know exactly who the Analyst is." Shigaraki was not gonna wait. "Well, say something, don't keep us waiting." Todoroki with a completely straight face said, "We are the Analysts." The league stopped. Shigaraki stared. Even Dabi looked mildly confused. They had all just immediately decided mutually they were lying to get out of this and keep it to themselves. The tension in the facility reached a breaking point as a new, profound presence manifested. A chilling shadow fell over the purification plant. A deep, resonating voice echoed, seemingly from everywhere and nowhere. All for one materialized in a massive, imposing silhouette at the facility's entrance, surrounded by the powerful, swirling aura of stolen quirks. His eyes settled, not on All Might's arriving figure outside, but on the small, restrained group of teenagers. "Show me," All for One commanded, his voice heavy with ancient power. "Show me the genius who causes such petty, perfect chaos. Reveal this Analyst so I may extinguish him." The Deku squad exchanged one final, determined look. Shigaraki sneered, eager for the information. "Speak, brat. Who is he?" Izuku Midoriya, the tactical lead analyst, spoke, his voice no longer stammering, but ringing with cold, absolute confidence that echoed terrifyingly in the silence. "Ida-kun. Uraraka-san. Todoroki-kun. Azui-san," Izuku commanded. He looked directly at Shigaraki, then at the monstrous figure of All for One. "We know exactly who the analyst is. We are the analysts." The facility, who heard the seriousness in their tone, plunged into a stunned silence, broken only by the echo of the declaration. Inside, Class 1A. Katsuki Bakugo's eyes widened with a complex mixture of validation and utter, furious betrayal. He strained against his restraints, spitting fire. The trauma-based drama club was a lie. The Ice Baby was a cover. "You nerdy, analytical, marshmallow-throwing traitor." Kirishima stared, his jaw hanging open. "Wait, so the marshmallow guy was our study group? That's surprisingly manly in a chaotic way." Momo Yaoyorozu gasped. The fluid dynamics of the rubber ducks. The precise non-stick ratios. It all makes logical sense now. Mineta Minoru, whimpering uncontrollably, "I knew Midoriya was scary, but this is terrifying. He's too smart for justice." Outside, pro heroes monitoring. Nedzu, watching the live feed, dropped his cup of tea. It clattered loudly on the floor. His eyes, however, glowed with an unnerving mixture of shock and profound, parental pride. Nedzu, clapping his paws together once, slowly, "Magnificent. Absolutely magnificent. The most strategic mastermind of the century, hidden in plain sight, using pure analytical chaos as a defense. Midoriya-kun. You are brilliant." All Might, transformed and pale, clutching his chest. Young Midoriya. All that exhaustion. All those notebooks. It wasn't just analysis of heroes. It was the blueprint for our systematic humiliation. Midnight, delighted, the little cinnamon roll is the biggest menace on the planet. And he had a team. Izawa, the blue menace, struggling out of his sticky goo miles away, his voice crackling over the comm system, filled with final defeat. I do not get paid enough for this blue nightmare. This is officially the worst class ever. All for One, however, was not amused. He felt a profound sense of insult. A pathetic group of disorganized children. All for One boomed, his voice echoing with cold fury. "You thought you could make a mockery of my society and hide behind glitter and duck toys?" He raised his arm, a monstrous quirk coalescing. "Your strategic genius ends here. You will be neutralized." Izuku, ignoring the terrified screams of his classmates and the stunned silence of the villains, looked at his team, whose restraints were suddenly looser, Tsu's pre-planted acid drool paying off. "Ida-kun. Uraraka-san. Todoroki-kun. Azui-san," Izuku commanded, his voice perfectly steady. "Execute final contingency, Operation Self-Destruct. Maximum absurdity. Maximum chaos. Now." The moment Izuku gave the command, the Deku squad moved with terrifying, practiced efficiency, the adrenaline of their confession fueling their escape. The slightly loosened restraints snapped free. "Uraraka-san. Initial chaos deployment. Go!" Izuku yelled. Uraraka, the vertical mobility specialist, immediately touched the floor, removing gravity from a large cluster of the restraints holding Class 1A. She then soared up, deploying Izuku's first wave of gadgets, a handful of sonic noise emitters and thermal flares aimed at the ceiling. The resultant noise and sudden heat spikes caused the Nomu to pause, confused, while a cloud of dust and debris obscured the arena. Ida-kun. Perimeter containment. Now. Ida, the deployment strategist, used his engine quirk to move at blinding speed, laying down a highly pressurized, multi-layered line of Izuku's latest sticky agent, the Super Slime Polytrap. 4. In a perfect, wide circle around the facility, instantly trapping the Nomu and the confused League members, Shigaraki, Toga, Dabi, in place. The perimeter was inescapable. They're not attacking us. They're trapping us. Shigaraki screamed, sinking instantly into the powerful adhesive. Assassin. Targeted sensory strike. Sue, the infiltration specialist, used the noise and dust as cover, leaping forward with terrifying speed. She didn't target AFO, but the immediate threats, Shigaraki and Dabi. She launched a specialized, sticky concentrated stink bomb and a net coated in blinding, shimmering, non-toxic algae directly into their faces, silencing Shigaraki's maniacal rage and momentarily blinding Dabi's flame control. All for One was furious, but momentarily baffled. His multiple quirks told him everything he needed to know: speed, gravity, sound, but the deployment was illogical and the intent was non-lethal. It was chaos designed to defeat Analysis. Amateurs, your petty tactics are useless against raw power. FO bellowed, drawing on multiple kinetic energy quirks to prepare a massive, destructive strike. Izuku knew AFO's weakness wasn't force, it was processing power. Todoroki-kun. Environmental chaos. Now. Todoroki, the containment specialist, acted instantly. He used his fire quirk to blast a wave of extreme, localized heat at the ceiling tiles, followed immediately by a pulse of extreme, localized cold on the floor. The facility was instantly plunged into a confusing, chaotic climate zone, simultaneously freezing the ground and creating scorching steam, confusing AFO's environmental quirks and internal sensors. And then came the ultimate blow to AFO's processing ability. Final payload. Uraraka. Uraraka, utilizing her zero-gravity assistance, launched Izuku's masterpiece, the super-saturated glitter bomb, MK-5. This wasn't just glitter, it was a payload of microparticles saturated with a non-toxic, quirk-dampening compound designed to stick to organic tissue and subtly interfere with energy flow. The air exploded in a massive, shimmering cloud of rainbow glitter. The glitter found every seam, every surface, and every exposed patch of skin on All for One, coating him entirely in a shimmering, psychedelic coating that also subtly slowed his ability to cycle through his stolen powers. All for One was reduced to a magnificent, glittering, steaming, freezing, confused behemoth. His power was immense, but his senses were screaming, his quirks felt sluggish, and he couldn't focus on the source of the attack. Enough! I will annihilate this room. AFO roared, powering up his strongest kinetic quirk. Izuku, the tactical lead, saw his chance. AFO was distracted by the sheer sensory chaos, leaving a minute analytical gap in his breathing apparatus as he screamed. Now, Shoto-kun. Low-pressure distraction, 30 degrees to the left. Todoroki fired a small, localized burst of flame, drawing AFO's remaining focus. As AFO turned, Izuku fired his final, ultimate weapon, a single, high-pressure canister of ablative marshmallow foam, MK-2. The foam shot out, perfectly calculated to hit the slight gap in AFO's facial armor, instantly expanding to smother his entire face in a thick, sticky, heat-resistant white substance. All for One was instantly blinded, his airways partially muffled, his sensory quirks smothered by the heavy, sweet-smelling, non-flammable foam. He flailed wildly, unable to see, breathe clearly, or focus the immense power building in his arm. His final, massive kinetic quirk attack was misfired, slamming harmlessly into the ceiling, creating a massive, chaotic hole but missing the students entirely. The chaos subsided. The League was trapped in the slime perimeter, covered in glitter and green algae. All for One was immobilized, a massive, glittering, steaming, foam-covered statue of defeated evil. The pro-heroes burst onto the scene, All Might transforming into his muscle form, ready for the fight of his life. They found absolute pandemonium. The facility, half frozen, half scorched, and absolutely covered in glitter. The villains, trapped in industrial slime, blinded by algae, and raging impotently. All for One, motionless, covered head to toe in marshmallow foam and shimmering glitter, completely defeated by pure absurdity. The Deku squad stood in the center, breathing heavily, but completely unharmed. All Might deflated, staggering back into his true form, staring at Izuku with utter, devastating confusion. All Might, whispering, "Young Midoriya, you defeated All for One." With the marshmallow foam. Izuku, wiping sweat from his brow, his analytical composure returned. It's the ablative marshmallow foam, All Might Sensei. The non-combustible polymer density, $, combined with the high thermal absorption coefficient, $\alpha_$, neutralized his sensory input and binding quirks within the immediate vicinity of his face. Simple engineering. Nedzu arrived, stepping over a trapped Nomu with chilling calm. He looked at the scene, the defeated AFO, the glitter, the chaos, and then at Izuku. Nedzu, clapping slowly, maniacally, "Midoriya-kun, I was wrong. You are not merely a genius. You are a strategic phenomenon. The level of non-lethal neutralization is unprecedented." Aizawa, the blue menace, having finally arrived, covered in new slime and blue dye, he simply looked at the scene, looked at the defeated AFO, looked at his blue hands, and then slowly began walking toward the exit. "I quit. I'm going to teach middle school art. I do not get paid enough for this." Bakugo, still restrained, tears of complex rage streaming down his face. "I'm going to kill you, Deku. I'm going to kill you and your marshmallow fluff-coated, trauma-based drama club." The Analysts had won. The hero world would never be the same. The aftermath of the Battle of the Water Plant was unprecedented. All for One was captured, still encased in glittering, marshmallow foam, and the League of Villains was largely contained in Ida's adhesive perimeter. The news was an absolute, global sensation. Every channel showed footage of the foam-covered, defeated AFO and the enormous pile of sticky, bright yellow super slime polytrap (MK4) containing the villains. The public reaction was schizophrenic. Heroes, initially lauded for capturing AFO. The Analysts, instantly revealed as the true heroes, having defeated the world's greatest threat with non-lethal, absurdist chaos. The former vigilante attacks, glitter, ducks, blue dye, were suddenly recontextualized as the strategic groundwork for a global threat takedown. Pro-Hero Commission plunged into crisis. They had spent months hunting the heroes who just saved the world, based on outdated definitions of legality. The Deku squad Izuku, Ida, Uraraka, Tsu, and Todoroki were taken directly to Nedzu's heavily guarded office for the inevitable reckoning. Aizawa, now in a dark hoodie, the blue dye refused to fade, slumped in a corner, refusing to look at them. All Might stood nearby, looking simultaneously proud, terrified, and utterly bewildered. Nedzu initiated the debriefing, circling the students with immense, unsettling focus. "Midoriya-kun, I have assessed the data," Nedzu began. "Your unit synchronization, strategic foresight, and utilization of non-quirk-based environmental sabotage are unmatched. Your methods are technically illegal, deeply humiliating to the pro-heroes, and saved the entire country." Ida, ever the moral compass, stood rigid. "Principal Nedzu, we understand the gravity of our actions. We are prepared to accept full consequences, including expulsion and revocation of our hero licenses, as per the UA Student Charter, Section 4. Aizawa sighed from his corner. "You made me look like a demon smurf for 3 months, kid. You defeated AFO with a confectionery polymer. The consequences are going to be bizarre." Nedzu smiled, his unsettling, wide grin stretching across his face. "Consequences, Ida-kun? There will be consequences for the outdated laws that made vigilantism necessary in the first place. Nezu hopped onto his desk, his gaze intense. The Hero Commission is reeling. They have no choice but to recognize the necessity of analytical strategy over raw power. The system is broken, Midoriya-kun has exposed that fracture beautifully. Nezu looked directly at Izuku, his eyes gleaming with ambition. Midoriya-kun, I hereby issue your consequence. You and your team are immediately required to form the UA Strategic Development and Non-Lethal Containment Division. Your work is now legal, mandatory, and highly funded. Izuku blinked. Legal? But the vigilante part? The vigilante part is now mandatory coursework, Nezu declared. You will no longer fight villains with glitter and foam secretly. You will now fight them with glitter and foam on the clock, with a budget. You will be my personal, direct students, responsible for designing the next generation of non-lethal, anti-analysis heroism. He then looked at Aizawa. Aizawa, you will be their official supervisor. This is your life now. Aizawa buried his head in his blue-tinted hoodie. I'm resigning. I'm legally changing my name and moving to a quiet farm. The rest of the Deku squad reacted with unified, hilarious excitement. Uraraka, so, we get paid to throw glitter and float dumpsters? This is the best job ever. Todoroki, this is the most logical path forward. No more secrecy. Excellent. Tsu, Karo, I can finally use my tongue slime for official containment protocols. Ida, sobbing dramatically, yet chopping his arm. With furious precision, a legal charter. A budget. This is the highest honor. We must draft the official strategic division bylaws immediately. Izuku, the once timid, quirkless boy who had to hide his brilliance, looked around the room at his victorious team, at the defeated pro-heroes, and at the mastermind Nezu. He grinned. Principal Nezu, when do we get the budget for the new giant, self-repairing, rubber duck drone fleet? We could use them for rescue. Nezu cackled, a high, triumphant sound. The paperwork is already filed, Midoriya-kun. Now, go clean the glitter off of All for One. That's your first official assignment. The world had been saved not by a powerful quirk, but by a study group armed with sticky foam and a genius who understood that the ultimate form of heroism was making evil look incredibly stupid. The newly formed UA Strategic Development and Non-Lethal Containment, SDNC, division had moved into their official headquarters, a large, surprisingly well-funded, former janitorial closet near the support course workshop. Their first official, sanctioned mission was a containment protocol test run on a minor nuisance villain known as the Gnat, a speedster flyer who specialized in snatching purses and evading capture in dense urban areas. Their new gadget, a terrifying amalgamation of their past successes, was the sonic-emitting, self-propelled, glitter foam boomerang, THEM-1. Deployment parameters must be within a 98% non-lethal probability radius, Ida, the now official chief deployment strategist, stated, affixing a UA logo sticker to the boomerang with surgical precision. We must also ensure the resulting glitter coverage is easily washable by municipal services. The mission was swift and terrifyingly efficient. The Gnat was operating at peak speed in a busy market square. Uraraka, utilizing her vertical mobility certification, launched the boomerang high above the square. Todoroki, providing environmental control, ensured a subtle updraft guided the projectile into the optimal flight path. The boomerang activated, emitting a high-pitched, incredibly irritating noise, sonic emitter, that scrambled the Gnat's focus. As the villain attempted to dive for cover, the boomerang completed its arc, spraying a concentrated burst of supersaturated glitter foam directly onto the villain. The foam, lightweight yet instantly adhesive, encased the Gnat mid-flight. He was trapped in a perfectly preserved, shimmering, orbiting bubble of foam and glitter, neutralized by utter absurdity. Pro-hero Midnight, who had tracked the Gnat's signal, arrived on the scene moments later, expecting a dramatic fight. She found the villain floating harmlessly 20 feet in the air, encased in glittering foam, struggling impotently against the sonic drone of the now-returning boomerang. Midnight sighed, rubbing the bridge of her nose. Seriously? More glitter. Izuku, wearing a new UA SDNC division jacket over his uniform, approached Midnight, holding a clipboard. Pro Hero Midnight, Izuku said calmly, handing her a data sheet. Containment achieved in 2.1 seconds with 0 collateral damage. The foam is biodegradable and provides superior thermal regulation. Our objective was non-lethal, high-speed neutralization of a mobility-based target. Midnight looked at the floating, glittering villain, then at Izuku's professional, analytical face. She looked down at the data sheet, which was entitled, Case Study 001, the Gnat, defeated by shiny silence. She let out a long, slow breath, finally conceding defeat to the inevitable change the Deku squad represented. Fine, Midoriya, Midnight conceded, pulling out her official report pad. File your paperwork. But if I find a single speck of glitter in my patrol car, I'm sending Aizawa after you, and he's going to be very, very blue. Izuku smiled, a genuine, delighted smile that was no longer nervous, but utterly confident in his strategic chaos. Understood, Midnight-sensei. We are optimizing our glitter for municipal vacuum suction in the next model. He returned to Ida, who was already stamping the mission report with a large, official UA seal. Mission successful, Analyst. Protocol followed. Legalized chaos achieved. Ida declared, his chopping hand motions now used to manage the SDNC division's rapidly growing filing system. The world had been saved, and now it would be permanently and gloriously inconvenienced, all in the name of justice. The era of the Analyst squad had officially begun.